Calm down a little. Chancellor.
They don't want to hear what the Tories did to schools like mine, but I will tell them. Textbooks rationed, libraries closed, kids herded into porter cabins in the playground, and I came into politics to change that. The money that I allocated at the spending review will fix the crumbling classrooms that the Conservatives left behind and build the schools that they promised but never delivered. And today, thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Wolverhampton North East and Leeds South West and Morley, I will provide £5 million for libraries in secondary schools, building on the £10 million commitment to ensure that every primary school has a school library within this Parliament. And thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Bournemouth East and from Luton North, I am providing £18 million to improve and upgrade playgrounds across England. Madam Deputy Speaker, let there be no doubt that this is a government that is on the side of our kids and who will back their potential. I will not allow the legacies of Conservative neglect to stain our society. Last year, I made changes to the mine workers' pension scheme to ensure that its members receive the fair pensions that they are owed. This year, with thanks to the Minister for Pensions for all his work in this subject, I can go further. I have heard representations from Labour coalfield MPs, including my honourable friends, the members for Bassetlaw, Blyth and Ashington, Barnsley South, Mansfield and Llanelli. And today I can announce that I will transfer the Investment Reserve Fund of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme to its members. So that the men and the women who worked in our coal industry get a fair deal in their retirement too. And more. Having heard representations from my honourable friends, the members for Banbury and the member for Edinburgh South West, I will index for inflation on pensions accrued before 1997 in the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assurance Scheme, so that people whose pension schemes became insolvent, no fault of their own, no longer lose out as the result of inflation. Last year, I also provided funding to compensate the victims of the infected blood scandal, after the previous government failed to budget for the costs of compensation. This year, I have listened to representations from my honourable friend, the member for Eltham and Chislehurst, and my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. And I'd like to thank the Minister for Employment for her representations over many years on this subject. As a result, I will exempt all payments from the infected blood scheme from inheritance tax, regardless of the circumstances in which those payments are passed down. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is how we should be spending taxpayers' money, on dealing with injustices and building strong public services, not on waste and inefficiency. At the spending review, I set an ambitious target of £14 billion of efficiencies per year by 2029, and I am grateful to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury for driving that work forward, realising savings through AI and automation, and by scrapping NHS England and reducing back-office staff by 18,000. At this budget, I will find a further £4.9 billion of efficiencies by 2031, getting rid of police and crime commissioners, cutting the cost of politics and local government, and selling government assets that we no longer have any use for. These savings will be required across...
Well, you are, of course, sorry to wake you up, by the way. We are listening to Budget 2020. I was just thinking, listening to all of that, remember the omni-shambles budget from some years ago? How we laughed, how we utterly lampooned Boy George, the then Chancellor. I mean, it was a right royal mess. Today, that budget looks like the work of Adam Smith. Today, we're in a whole new league of breathtaking incompetence. This is off the scale when it comes to the omni-shambles measure. We already knew much of the details of Budget 2025. This thing had leaked like an industrial sieve. Boomerang Rach had been forced to deny and obfuscate for the last 3 weeks. We've had a buffet of tacit announcements by the hour. But today, that went into a whole new stratosphere because the OBR, the guardians of fiscal determination, went and leaked the whole thing just before the Chancellor had even got into a government car. Imagine the horror, the humiliation, where your entire work is dropped into the public domain half an hour before you've arrived at the dispatch box. Not the odd rumour, not the odd little bit of tittle-tattle, a lot of possibly this, possibly that. No, every scintilla, every detail thrown out there for the consumption of anyone who cares to look. That wasn't supposed to be how a budget pans out. We'll cross back to the House of Commons and get the good news, hopefully, shortly. First, political correspondent Alicia Fitzgerald is with us to have a little chinwag, Alicia, over what's been going on so far. I mean, have you ever seen anything quite like it?
I mean, the OBR leak was truly shocking, and I've seen people with a lot longer careers than me say they have never seen anything quite so astounding directly before a budget by an organisation that's very reputable across the UK. This isn't some small random company where a technical error, which is what they are saying the issue was, seems like a kind of lightly excuse. This is a huge organisation that works so closely with the government and with all kinds of organisations across the UK. So it's a massive deal that this was leaked early, not less because it is not good for Rachel Reeves. The whole purpose of her standing in the Commons is to put her pitch out to the public and to try and basically show her workings for the decisions she's made. When all of that is leaked before, it spooks the markets, and it means the public can make their minds up before they've actually heard it from her. Absolutely,
and it is a moment for a Chancellor. I mean, not that this should be about building your career. It's about public money and how the government spends our money. But nonetheless, it's meant to be the big moment. She's the gatekeeper of all matters financial, and her standing there at the dispatch box is it has a history. It's as important as it gets in the political calendar. So to have your work spewed out half an hour before, I mean, I can't imagine what's going on at the OBR right now. I mean, we've all sent an email and accidentally pressed send before we finished it. I mean, this takes that into a whole new territory. Heads may roll, who knows? But I mean, she did acknowledge this at the beginning of the budget, of course. So what do we know? Just sort of an abridged version so far, Alicia, because we will dip back in to see what she's saying. Is there any good news first? Is there anything that you've permed from this? You think, well, actually, do you know what? We thought it was going to be a stinker, but guess what? She's only gone and done. Any of that?
Oh, do you know what? I was going to start with the bad news to get that out of the way first. So, look, I mean, it depends how you take it. I think because we were kind of primed and ready for income tax to increase, and then we did have that little U-turn from them kind of indicating it wouldn't, but because they kind of got that spook out of the way, this kind of income tax threshold freezing, only just extending it for a couple of years, I think to some people might even seem slightly like good news. I mean, clearly it's not the best news because it still means that lots of people are going to be dragged into paying more tax than they technically should be for longer. However, I think given the options and given the chance that income tax could increase for literally everyone, I think that could be seen as slightly not as bad as it could have been. Of course, we know that rail fares are going to be frozen for a bit longer. And as well, lots of these policies and lots of people, maybe towards the left of the party, are going to say that this is a budget very much aimed at upper middle classes and wealthier people, which of course could also be interpreted as a good thing, depending on where you sit on the spectrum, and probably not if you are a wealthier person, I imagine. There's another policy in there that says that drivers of battery electric cars will be hit by a 3p per mile tax from April 2028. Again, it's one of those ones where it just depends on where you sit, because of course if you have an electric car, that's really bad news. However, these are things that usually are owned by people with more money, so you could say that really when you're taking the pick of the bunch, is that as bad as it could be?
Yeah. Is there anything yet on fuel duty free? So did she mention that within the electric car announcement?
Yes, she did. Let me find the exact thing. So yes, fuel duty is to be frozen until next September. The duty, the tax paid on diesel and petrol has been frozen at 52 pence, 52.95 pence per litre. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously also a slightly more positive measure. It's
a little moment for the next 12 months. Stay with us, Alicia. We're going to cross back to the House of Commons. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, we think, drawing towards conclusion territory, but don't hold your breath on that one. Here's Rachel Reeves.
for disability benefits. Those are the face-to-face assessments that the Shadow Chancellor got rid of when he was Work and Pension Secretary. And our changes to universal credit will get 15,000 people back into work, a figure confirmed today. The former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, will review the causes of rising youth inactivity, and we are already taking action. I'm grateful to the Federation of Small Businesses and Small Business Britain for their representations on apprenticeships. And today I am announcing funding to make the training for under 25 apprenticeships completely free for small and medium-sized enterprises. And funding our new youth guarantee, providing £820 million over the next 3 years to give young people who are let down by the Conservatives the support and the opportunity that they deserve. Guaranteeing every young person a place in college, an apprenticeship or personalised job support. And after 18 months, 18 to 21-year-olds will be offered paid work, not benefits. The Motability Scheme was set up to protect the most vulnerable, not to subsidise the lease on a Mercedes-Benz. And so I am making reforms that will reduce generous taxpayer subsidies, and Motability have confirmed that they will remove luxury vehicles from their scheme, getting the scheme back to its original purpose of offering cost-effective leases to disabled people. And taxpayers' money should not be spent on pensions for people abroad, who only lived here for a couple of years and may never even have paid a penny in tax. The Conservatives allowed thousands of people living abroad to buy their way into the state pension for as little as £3.50 a week, debasing the purpose of our pension system. And so I will abolish access to Class 2 voluntary national insurance contributions for people living abroad, increasing the time that someone has to live or work in Britain to 10 years and increasing the contributions that they must pay. These reforms improve our welfare system, they support our young people, protect those who need it most, and put an end to Conservative waste and unfairness. Madam Deputy Speaker, to break the cycle of austerity, we need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use, and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution. The previous Conservative government froze personal tax thresholds from 2021 to 2028. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028. Ensuring that people...
Order! They're not smart. The noise is far too high. Chancellor.
The Right Honourable Lady supported these freezes when her party made them. She might want to forget about it, but the British people never will. At the same time, we are ensuring that people only in receipt of the basic or new state pension do not have to pay small amounts of tax through simple assessment from April 2027. I will also keep the Plan 2 student loan repayments threshold at its 2026-27 level for 3 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that maintaining these thresholds is a decision that will affect working people. I said that last year, and I won't pretend otherwise now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most. The Conservatives knew that our tax system didn't work. Time and time again, they ducked the necessary reforms, leaving a system unfit for a changing economy, with unfairness that they refused to address. Currently, a landlord with an income of £25,000 will pay nearly £1,200 less in tax than their tenants with the same salary, because no national insurance is charged on property, dividend or savings income. It's not fair that the tax system treats different types of income so differently. And so I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and dividend income by 2 percentage points, and the additional rate of tax on property and savings income by 2 percentage points. Even after these reforms, 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings. As well as narrowing the gap between the tax on income from assets and income from work, I also believe that a fair society is one where the wealthiest pay their fair share. The reforms I made last year will raise an additional £8 billion a year by 2020-30 from wealth. I increased taxes last year on private equity, private schools and private jets. I abolished the non-dom tax regime. And this year, I will make 2 changes to cap trust charges and prevent avoidance. I reformed inheritance tax on agricultural and business assets. And this year, I am aligning those reforms with wider inheritance tax rules by allowing the transfer of the 100% relief allowance between spouses, balancing the taxation of these valuable assets with the realities of family life. In this budget, I will take further steps to deal with a long-standing source of wealth inequality in our country. A Band D home in Darlington or Blackpool pays just under £2,400 in council tax, nearly £300 more than a £10 million mansion in Mayfair. And so, from 2028, I am introducing the high-value council tax surcharge in England, an annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million, rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. This will be collected alongside council tax, levied on owners, and we will consult on options for support or deferral. This new surcharge will raise over £400 million by 2031 and will be charged on less than the top 1% of properties. Madam Deputy Speaker, reliefs in our tax system cost the taxpayer billions of pounds a year, but many of them no longer serve their original purpose. The government rightly provides generous tax relief for people paying into a pension, relieving income tax on all contributions and on the investment itself, as well as national insurance relief on employer contributions, at a cost of over £70 billion a year to the Exchequer. This budget makes no changes to those reliefs or to the tax-free lump sum. But salary sacrifice for pensions, which was intended to be a small part of our pension system, is forecast to almost treble in cost to other taxpayers, from £2.8 billion in 2017 to £8 billion by 2030, with the greatest benefit going to the highest earners, or to those in the financial services sector putting their bonuses into pensions tax-free, while those on the minimum wage or those whose employers don't offer salary sacrifice don't benefit at all. That is not sustainable for our public finances, putting pressure on the tax that everyone else pays. And so I am introducing a £2,000 cap on salary sacrifice into a pension, with contributions above that taxed in the same way as other employee pension contributions. That is a pragmatic step so that people, especially on low and middle incomes, can continue to use salary sacrifice for their pension without paying any more in tax than they do now, and to give individuals and employers time to adjust to these new arrangements. These changes will come into effect in 2029. The coalition government introduced 100% relief from capital gains tax on business sales made to employee ownership trusts, creating a route for gains to go completely untaxed when businesses are sold. I will reduce that relief to 50%, retaining a strong incentive for employee-owned companies. And as we work towards doubling the size of the cooperative economy, the Department for Business and Trade will launch a call for evidence on how we can better support co-ops to grow. Because of the changes that I have made to capital gains tax this year and last year, receipts are forecast to increase from £14 billion this year to £30 billion.
And we will dive back in to see if there's any further announcements. Alicia Fitzgerald is still with us. There was quite a lot in that last chunk, Alicia, particularly on issues around benefits and council tax, and giving the old landlords a bit of a kicking as well.
Yeah, definitely. So the council tax is an interesting one. It's basically going to be called a mansion tax, and it means the most expensive properties in the countries, that's those worth more than 2 million, will basically have to pay a little bit extra. That's about 2,500 for properties worth 2 million to 2.5, and all the way up to 7.5 thousand for, sorry, did I say 2.5 million? 2.5 thousand for properties worth 2 million, and up to 7,500 for homes valued at around 5 million. So definitely an extra tax there. I think overall that policy won't be that unpopular. Lots of people are generally not that happy with the way our council tax system works in the UK. You often have people in very small houses in poorer parts of the UK paying almost the same council tax as those in more expensive properties.
I suppose just to step in on that point, I mean, it depends what you see the purpose of council tax. Now, if the purpose of council tax is paying for, you know, the bins to be collected, the street lights to be on, the potholes to be fixed, and the fire service to turn up if there's a blaze in your back garden, then you could reasonably argue, well, surely everybody would just pay the same for that. Wouldn't matter how big your house is. But of course, we've sort of forgotten that principle, and now it does seem to come down to the perception of really how well off you are.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid point. And I also think we don't yet know whether this particular funding generated from this measure will be ring-fenced for certain councils. That's the other key thing. If this money in these specific areas where the properties are worth more is all going to remain within the council's realm, that's probably going to be more popular than if people are just paying for general government policy seemingly out of their own pockets because they have a bigger, a nicer house. I think that kind of is quite a big distinguishing difference between the two. There was a lot there just generally about economic measures as well. Of course, we've already heard about the freezing of those income tax thresholds. I mean, it is really a stealth tax. This was something that was introduced by the Conservatives way back when and has gradually been extended and extended. Of course, these income tax thresholds are meant to rise incrementally with inflation and with the average wage. Of course, when they're frozen, it means that as your wage increases, you're likely to kind of go up a tax band, which means you're just paying effectively too much tax, I suppose. So definitely a bit of a divisive one there.
And on that issue of, I mean, she mentioned landlords, and within that, dividends and capital gains and all the rest of it. She drew a curious analogy that, you know, a landlord doesn't pay any national insurance, but the tenant does. Well, that's because the landlord isn't employing anybody. I mean, that would be the answer to that, wouldn't it? I mean, it's sort of a bit like saying there's a man over there employs 2 people and a man over there employs 1 person. So the 1 person should pay the same as the 2 people. I mean, it doesn't really make any logical sense other than here's another way to hoover up a few quid.
Well, I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there, Ian. I think it is a way just to hoover up a few extra quid, to be honest. And I think from Rachel Reeves's point of view, she's going to look at which groups of people in the country are the least risky, I suppose, to annoy in this budget. And I suppose if you look kind of at the numbers, if you raise income tax, you're going to annoy every single working person in the UK. That's not going to be popular. If you kind of do something that penalises landlords, I mean, not many people are landlords in the UK in the grand scheme of the numbers. I reckon the logic there is very much, okay, it's something that could raise a little bit of cash and probably not risk annoying too many people in the grand scheme compared to other policies that could have gone forward. But it's interesting as well because that salary sacrifice is another thing that is going to probably hit employers and businesses as well. And we know just how badly that national insurance increase was and how badly that went down with employers earlier in the year. This salary sacrifice scheme will reduce an employee's taxable pay. That in turn reduces the employer's national insurance contributions. So I imagine we're going to hear a lot from businesses in the next few days saying that basically there's no incentive to own a business anymore and say that Labour is really combating ambition.
Yeah. I mean, if you own a business, a small business, and you live in a tasty house and you happen to be be a landlord, you're probably wondering what you did wrong in a previous life right now.
It's very true, yeah. I mean, look, the trouble is that Labour will say that this is a very Labour policy. They aren't there to support that particular group of people. They are there to support the people who are least well off in society. The critics will argue, though, that really is this budget doing either? Are we actually really uplifting anyone from the bottom? Of course, you could argue that the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap might do that, and lift children out of poverty. But again, that's a divisive policy. Yeah. And obviously that tax on landlords. But I mean, look, it's one of those budgets where Labour will try and claim it's kind of quintessentially Labour. They're just taxing the people who can carry it. But I think the critics will definitely say that it's probably not doing enough for either side.
Stay with us, Alicia. We're going to dip back into what is happening. It's Budget 2025 live from the House of Commons. It's an event. Well, it would have been a bigger event had somebody not leaked the entirety of it half an hour before Rachel Reeves even started speaking. That's where we're at in levels of breathtaking incompetence surrounding this entire budget, which has leaked on the hour for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Let's find out more what Rachel Reeves has to say.
Everyone's contribution as low as possible through reforms to make our tax system stronger, closing loopholes, ensuring that the wealthiest pay their share, and building a tax system that is fairer for the future as our economy changes. On the day I became Chancellor, I said that I would judge my time in office a success if I knew that ordinary children from working class backgrounds were living more fulfilling lives. Their horizons expanded, their potential realised. I joined the Labour Party. I came into politics because I believe that every child has equal worth and deserves an equal chance to achieve their promise. The biggest barrier to equal opportunity is child poverty. Because for every child that grows up in poverty, our society pays a triple cost. The first and the heaviest is to the child. Going to school hungry, waking up in a cold home, or in another B&B. While other children enjoy the advantages of parents with time to help with homework, the quiet space at home to work in, too many go without. And there is also the cost of supporting a family in poverty, which ends up in the lap of overstretched councils, who can do no more than shunt them into temporary accommodation at huge cost to local taxpayers. Then there is the future cost to our economy and to our society, of wasted talent and a welfare system that bears the cost of failure for decades to come. Young people with so much to contribute, but whose potential is suffocated early by limited life chances and missed opportunities, struggling to make their way in a society that did not look out for them. I don't intend to preside over a status quo that punishes children for the circumstances of their birth and demands that we all pay 3 times over for it. Since last July, we've rolled out free breakfast clubs in schools. We're expanding free school meals to 500,000 more kids, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty as we do it. We've passed the Renters' Rights Act, and we've extended the childcare offer. And I'm proud of all of that. But it's not enough. Because there is one policy that pushes kids into poverty more than any other. It was introduced by the party opposite. They said it would save money and that it would bring about behavioural change, disincentivising poorer families from having more children. Well, even on its own terms, it failed. The welfare bill has continued to rise, and there's been no difference in the size of families. But what it has done is to push hundreds of thousands of children into poverty since it was introduced. They said they were punishing parents' choices, but it's the kids who have paid the price. They've paid the price for the policies of a party which opted for cynical gimmicks over real savings in our welfare system. I understand that many families are finding times hard and that many kids have had to make difficult choices when it comes to having kids. And there are many reasons why people choose to have children and then find themselves in difficult times. The death of a partner, separation, ill health, a lost job. I don't believe that children should have to bear the brunt of that. And neither can I, in good conscience, leave in place the vile policy known as the rape clause, requiring women to prove if their child has been conceived non-consensually to receive support. I'm proud to be Britain's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. I take the responsibilities that come with that seriously. I will not tolerate the grotesque indignity of women, of the rape clause, any longer. It is dehumanising, it is cruel, and I will remove it from the statute book. And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the two-child limit in full from April. This side of the house. It's amazing what people get so angry about, and we've seen their true colours today. The thing they get angry about is lifting children out of poverty.
Order! Order. Our constituents will want to hear the Chancellor.
I think our constituents have heard all they need to from the party opposites today. We on this side of the House do not believe that the solution to a broken welfare system is to punish the most vulnerable. We are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty with the end of the two-child limit. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, combined with other actions we are taking, this Labour government is achieving the biggest reduction in child poverty over a parliament since records began. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know how worried families are about the cost of everything. Worried that their money won't stretch to the end of the month. Worried that price... I think if you've got a house that's worth £5 million a year, you can probably afford it. But you get more exercise about reducing child poverty than you do about the richest paying more. Under this government, wages have risen by more since we were elected than in 10 years under the last government, with lower interest rates already saving families £1,200 a year off a typical new mortgage, compared to that to when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But I know that people still face pressure on their budgets day to day and week to week. And where there is more to do, where we can provide relief, we are doing it. Extending the bus fare cap, cracking down on rip-off price hikes, freezing prescription charges, and freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, in line with our commitment to the triple lock. At the election, we promised a genuine living wage, and we are delivering it. At the budget last year, I increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage, and I am doing the same this year too. Accepting the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission in full, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. Under current plans, the temporary 5p cut to fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic will come to an end in April, and fuel duty will be uprated in line with inflation. But I know that the cost of travelling to and from work is still too expensive. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026. And because I know that changes in wholesale prices are not always passed on to motorists, I am bringing in new rules to mandate petrol forecourts to share real-time price rises through a new fuel finder, empowering drivers to find the cheapest fuel, calling out rip-offs and strengthening competition, saving the average household £40 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest drivers of the rising cost of living is the cost of energy prices. The cause of high energy bills must be tackled at source, and so we are investing in energy security, in nuclear and renewable energy, and in insulation through our Warm Homes Plan. But that's not enough when people are struggling with energy bills today. The Conservatives' Eco Scheme was presented as a plan to tackle fuel poverty. It costs households £1.7 billion a year on their bills. And for 97% of families in fuel poverty, the scheme, get this, has cost them more than it's saved. It is a failed scheme, and so I am scrapping it, along with taking other legacy costs off bills. And as a result, I can tell you today that for every family, we are keeping our promise to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living. With £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year. Money off bills and in the pockets of working people, that is my choice. Not to neglect Britain's energy security like the Tories did. Not to leave working families to bear the brunt of high prices like the Tories did. But to get energy costs down now and in the future. That is the Labour choice. And Madam Deputy Speaker, one more thing. Because of our action on bills and on prices, as a direct result of this budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed today that inflation is coming down faster and will be a full 0.4 percentage points lower next year. That's the benefit of a Labour government cutting the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government is changing our country. In the face of challenges on our productivity, I will grow our economy through stability, investment and reform. I've met my fiscal rules and built our economic resilience for the future. I have asked everyone to contribute, yes, for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. But I have kept that contribution as low as possible by reforming our tax system, making it fairer and stronger for the future. I have protected our NHS, maintaining public investment and driving efficiency in government spending. I've taken action on our broken welfare system, rooting out waste and lifting children out of poverty. And I have cut the cost of living, with money off bills and prices frozen, all while keeping every single one of our manifesto commitments. Those are my choices.
Mr. Rankin, Miss Morton, your voice carries right across the chamber. Right across the chamber. Try and take a breath every so often. Chancellor.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists, and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
There it is, Budget 2025. I think you could say that that was a Labour budget in many respects. Of course, The number crunchers are the ones that often count in this, and Alicia Fitzgerald's still with us just for a few final words on this. It's invariably the next morning, isn't it, when the bean counters have been out, the abaci have been hammered, and everybody has worked out exactly who's well off, who's not, and then you sort of get a truer picture of what has happened. I've never, ever seen a chancellor stand there, Alicia, and say, I'm sorry, this is a terrible budget, and I apologise profusely. It's always weaved with positivity.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some people would probably like to see a chancellor say that. It would maybe be a bit refreshing, but at the same time, it doesn't really do much, I suppose, for the public's kind of enthusiasm and feeling of hope, I suppose, moving forward. The thing is with the number crunching is, of course, it's always the next day when the dust starts to settle, but there are some loopholes that people have already found already. So scrapping that two-child benefit cap, as well as the other crackdowns on benefit fraud, that's going to cost $3 billion. The salary sacrifice changes, that's going to generate $4.7 billion. So that's going to be a hugely profitable policy. But when you actually think that a lot of that's going to be eaten by the $3 billion that it's going to cost to scrap the two-child benefit cap. Of course, Rachel Reeves is saying that the extra taxes on gambling, for example, are going to fund that scrap. But I think it'll be really interesting, and someone way more qualified than me to do all the maths tomorrow can really break down all of those numbers, because I think a lot of the worry at the moment is that the scraps and the kind of bonuses, I suppose, in this budget are maybe a little bit too high for the amount that's going to be generated if we're also trying to plug that massive black hole. Yeah,
I sense that too. And of course, it was unusual to watch this budget knowing that we already knew what was in it. And I don't just mean those leaks beforehand. The OBR, you and I in the last section talked about freeze on fuel duty before she'd even announced it, because we knew, because we had that detail, which is extraordinary. That, of course, will haunt somebody for a long time, but nonetheless, I suppose you could say it wasn't literally her fault. What they did say, however, which could be laid at her doorstep, was that they are forecasting economic growth this year to go from 1% to 1.5%. I mean, it's tiny. But the downgrading for the next 4 years is the bit that I think people will look at. Those forecasts are pretty bleak.
They are, and the upgrade of just 0.5% isn't enough to kind of quell the downgrade for that longer period of time. I think if the kind of immediate boost had been a bit higher, you may be able to look at it and say, okay, well, at least there's a bit of good news in the short term. But when the longer term forecast has been downgraded, I think, it doesn't really send the best signal, and it doesn't really show that the right people have enough trust in the future policies of Rachel Reeves either, or the kind of impact of some of these policies now, because lots of these don't come into play immediately. Some of these aren't actually due to be implemented until a few years' time. So this OBR reaction is very much based on that too. And I think that kind of sends an overall picture of it not being too good.
Indeed. Alicia, you've been brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great day. Alicia Fitzgerald, political correspondent with us, just analysing and chewing over what we've heard so far. We're going to get more voices on this. James Price, Sebastian Salick joins us. Sasha Lord, former Labour Party donor as well, is going to be on too. And, of course, you as well. Your reactions to what you've heard. 0344 499 1000. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Lots to get through. Let's get a word from different parts of the political spectrum. Joining us now, Sebastian Salick, Labour councillor, and James Price, former special advisor to Number 10 when the Tories were back in power, if you can remember those heady days. James can. Listen, James, firstly, let's just get a word from you. Your overview, if you like, from what you've heard from Rachel Reeves for the last hour or so.
Well, I can't give you a fully honest overview because we're a family programme, but I do think that an awful lot of what came out of the Chancellor's mouth smelled distinctly like the floor of the cowshed. I mean, I can see why people despise politicians with some of the weasel words and some of the language that came out from the Chancellor. This idea that the Conservatives are in some way evil because they didn't want this two-child benefit cap, for example, to be lifted. This is the idea now that all the people who work hard who watch this programme are to be taxed extra money now for as many children as those who can't afford to pay for them have. And it's somehow supposed to be moral and kind to take money away from hardworking people to give it to those who don't plan those sorts of families. Of course, there can be exceptions on these things, but it's a small part of a wider problem, which is that the Labour Party takes money away from those who work hard and generate it, giving it to other areas that are either shouldn't be having it or are economically unproductive to keep them afloat, to buy continuing votes, which is what Rachel Reeves did all the way through, and they dress it up as kindness.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian, that is fair, isn't it? I mean, I think you will have a different assessment of the budget, but it's the classic sort of Labour left-wing card to play, that our decisions are not different, they're morally different.
Look, I'm not going to get into morals. I'm quite shocked, James, by your lack of compassion on this one. These are people who, look, we buy into the spectre that there are poor people pumping out babies to their heart's desire and expecting the state to pay for it. These are often people who a parent has fallen ill, a parent has died, they fall into destitution, and we owe it to ourselves as Britain, as a country, to help those people out when they need it. So I think it was the right...
Do you think that is a typical case of where this benefit will fall? Someone who's on hard times?
I don't think there's any typical case, but the reality is the benefit system is there for people who fall on hard times. Now, look, people shouldn't be taking the mickey. People shouldn't be taking benefits if they don't need them, and that's why we see face-to-face assessments coming back, and I think that's really important. You've got to make sure the system is robust, but you've also got to make sure that people who need the help can get it. It's what we owe them.
What did you make, Sebastian, in terms of the kind of overarching feel of what happened here? I mean, just putting aside the fact that we were actually given the budget half an hour before Rachel Reeves even said anything. I mean, that's a little bit of a blooper, I think we can say, but perhaps not her fault, I get it. And we'd had all the teasing up to the moment. Overall, did it tick all of the boxes you, as a Labour man, wanted it to tick?
Do you know what, Ian? I'm pleasantly surprised. I think in the last few weeks we'd all been dreading what we might have heard today, and just looking at the cold numbers of it, there's a lot to be pleased about. We've got a lot of positive assessments from the OBR, borrowing falling as a net share of GDP, net financial debt lower at the end of the next forecast. You've got growth upgraded, you've got inflation on track to be within the 2% target in 2 years' time. This is where we need to be as a country. This is part of the process of economically rewiring the state, and frankly, much better than it was looking like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, James, you recognise that? Is it looking better now? You've got a nice warm feeling in the pit of your belly, having heard Rachel Reeves speak?
Quite the opposite, and I've known Seb a long time, and he's much smarter than to know that this is a good budget in any way, shape or form. Unfortunately, it looks like she has tried to fill numbers to fit the OBR's rules rather than to fit the overall health of the economy. What we will see as a result of this is still huge amounts more borrowing, and we're living way beyond our means. We'll see more people who actually produce things and are constructive towards the economy fleeing this country, so the taxes go up on the rest of us. We'll see investment dry up. We'll see more people look at Britain as a basket case. We can't even wait until someone has sat down before a PDF gets released online. We're supposed to be able to build the technologies and industries of the future. No, I think it's a shambles. I think Rachel Reeves has put maybe another nail into the coffin of Britain if we're not careful. And that may sound a little bit much, but we've got another, 3 budgets perhaps from this Labour government coming along. Do we seriously think that they understand anything about how economics works? More people will look at this and flee in their droves. And that's why I'm so downcast about all of this. And this idea, by the way, we owe it to people to give more money. But we already have an unbelievably generous and progressive system whereby the top 1% of people pay 28%, I think it is, of all income taxes. The top 4% or 5% pay 50% of all of it, and that money is redistributed to people. So take that 2-child benefit cap. We already have the richest people pay for people who can't look after their own children, up to 2 children. And lots of people like me who are trying to start a family will not be able to have as many children as we want to have because we would think it would be fiscally irresponsible to do it. So yet again, I'm going to say this was a budget for Labour members like Seb and for people who want to take the hard-won gains of those who are in the productive parts of the economy.
Yeah, and I mean, on that point, Sebastian, nobody's going to cry for someone who's got a £10 million Mayfair house. I mean, I think we all understand that. There might be people who dip into that new council tax threshold because they bought a house in 1952 for about 38 quid that now happens to be worth quite a lot of money. And of course, it depends on your definition of things like council tax. Is it there based on the size of your house or based on the services you use? And if it's the latter, then why should somebody who happens to have a bigger house that's artificially inflated in price be paying thousands of pounds more? It's those kind of narratives that sort of feed into the fact that this is socialism that's alive and well and back again.
I mean, you can call it what you want. I just think it's fairness. I mean, I don't quite know how.
Why is it fair? I know I appreciate that is a sort of go-to Labour line. It's fair because he's got a house that's worth 100 grand and he's got one that's worth 2 million, so therefore he should pay more. I mean, we don't apply that to other products. We don't say your Ford Fiesta is going to cost you 10 grand more in Mayfair than it does in Middlesbrough.
Well, you can move a Ford Fiesta, you can't move a house. Look, I'm the son of immigrants. I'm a big believer in aspiration. I want people to shoot for the moon, make a load of money, and then pay their fair share in taxes as well. But look at where we are economically. We're in a really tight spot. Somebody's going to have to pay a little bit more to help out. And if you ask me, should it be the poor or should it be the rich? I'll tell you it's going to be the rich any day.
They're already, but as James said, the rich are already demonstrably paying more in and arguably taking less out. If you want to look at areas like healthcare and private education, you could make that argument too.
You're completely right, but the position is dire. We've been in these terrible situations since 2008. The Tories had 14 years to sort it out. They only made it worse, I'm afraid to say. And what that means is that the rich, who are already contributing a lot, are going to have to contribute more. One of the ways of doing that is by asking them to pay a little bit more in what is effectively council tax. If you live in a home,
if we're only asking them, then that's fine.
James.
This is the language at Rachel Review. So we're going to ask people to pay a little bit more. That's right then. Presumably.
Okay, we can pick up on semantics. Forcing them. I don't really care as long as they pay.
Right, forcing. Now we're getting to it, right? Forcing, exactly right. And what's going to happen?
That's what tax is. It's the law, isn't it?
Yeah, some will pay some more, but if you force them to keep doing this, what will happen is the trend we've already seen, which is that Britain is losing more rich people than any other country in the world. And that means you won't get any of their tax money. You won't get any of their innovations.
You're talking rubbish now, mate.
We're already seeing it. People can go to the
Labour government
website.
Sebastian, I'll come back to you, Sebastian. James, finish this point.
It's not rubbish at all. You can go to the Adam Smith Institute website, see the paper on this. We're losing more millionaires than any other country in the world. They're all going to places like Dubai or even to Italy or wherever else, and those people will benefit from the money and all the rest of it. If you tax people too much, as you're saying, they will start to leave and the burden will get even greater on the rest of us and the doom cycle will repeat, and whoever is Chancellor next year, because I doubt it's Rachel Reeves, will come back and take even more money because they still won't learn their lessons.
Sebastian.
It's not often I get to call Project Fear, but I'm going to do it this time. When the Labour government brought in the scrapping of non-doms, they thought a lot of them were going to leave the country. They had planned for that financially. Far fewer left. And do you know why? Because it's a really good place to live. People don't just live here for the tax benefits. They live here because Britain is a brilliant country. Whether you're in London or elsewhere, it is a really lovely place to raise a family. I've got friends from all over the world who are coming here to live because they'd rather live here than in their home countries. And they're from really pretty rich places in East Asia as well, where you could have a pretty good life. So let's not talk ourselves down as a country. We are a brilliant nation, and there are so many
numbers
reasons
don't lie.
beyond an attractive tax regime.
Well, how do
Your anecdotes don't get around the way of the data. It's also becoming a less safe country for people. It's also becoming a less, if we want to use the word, fair place. And after this budget, fewer people will be coming into this country, more will be leaving, and the rest of us will be poorer as a result. I mean, that's the Labour budget.
Sebastian, you talked about being sort of tacitly positive about this budget. I think you said it quite surprised you in that respect. But if you look at the OBR, that information that we got before Rachel Reeves told us, the increases for economic growth are not good. I mean, yes, it goes up a tiny notch for this year. We haven't got much of that left, but downgrading its forecast for the next 4 years. Half a decade of downgraded growth.
Well, they're still at about 1.5%, and you have to compare them to similar countries. So if you look at the rest of the G7, this growth forecast is ahead of those. You have to take these things relatively. Look, I wish that Britain, all other countries similar to us, were surging ahead. The reality is we're just not. We've been through COVID. We have been through Brexit as a country. We've had the 2008 crisis. I'll mention it again because it affected us all so awfully. You have to take all of this into context. But the point is we're going in the right direction. I think we can take a lot of heartening reassurance from that.
Do you think moving 920,000 people into paying more tax is the right direction?
Well, if it's what it takes to balance the books, then it is the right direction.
That's a tax rise. That's a manifesto pledge broken, right?
Look, I mean, you can argue over the semantics.
It's not really semantics. That is a reality,
well,
isn't it?
It is semantics.
Well, it's not semantics. There's nearly 1 million people going to pay more tax. That's a tax rise.
Yeah, I mean, look, as the Tories did, they froze the brackets as well from 2021 to.
Well, it's not the principle of freezing the brackets. It's the principle of saying you won't raise taxes and then raising taxes.
But what I'm saying is it doesn't really matter. Look, who cares?
Well, it does if you're one of the 920,000 people that's going to pay more tax. 780,000 on the basic rate are going to increase. I mean, this is a bonanza of tax rises.
But remember, Ian, the minimum wage is also coming up. So those at the lower end of the earnings scale are getting supported. We're in the position where everybody is going to have to help out. It's just the way that we are as a country. We pull together in difficult times like this. It's not positive because we end up paying more tax. No one wants to do that. But it means you can balance the books, as we have done, and get a lot of fiscal room as well, which I was really pleasantly surprised by. If you ask about surprises, I didn't expect her to have that much to play with, which is a good thing.
I mean, who doesn't like a bit of fiscal room, James Price? What do you make of those non-tax rises then?
Well, the difference between previously the country having to come together was because of an external shock like COVID. Now it's all entirely self-inflicted wounds that people are coming to be forced together to be paying more tax. Look, we went through 14 years of the Labour Party attacking the Tories for austerity. And frankly, there wasn't actually a huge amount of austerity because spending kept increasing massively beyond our means. It just increased by a slower rate than it did under Labour. But what we can see from tax rises, a tax rise is a form of austerity. It means that people will be left with less money in their pocket at the end of the day. When you look at the poorest people in society, they pay the highest proportion of their income in taxes once you include all the indirect taxes and everything else. And we're already at the highest level of taxes since the Second World War. It's not working. Trying to get any kind of spending reductions was thrown out the window a few months ago when Labour tried an absolutely minuscule spending restraint. Their backbenchers rebelled on it, and some of them said, I don't understand. It's only a few billion quid. What's the problem? Which shows the Labour Party's weaknesses in a nutshell. And this was a budget for Labour backbenchers to not throw Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer out, and the rest of us are picking up the tab for it.
Final points here, guys. You alluded to it, James, earlier. Rachel Reeves, will she be in that position in a year's time? Because if she's not, then that suggests neither will Keir Starmer be.
No, well, look, I've been very, very aggressive and very anti-Rachel Reeves because I'm just sick of having to listen to her for the past hour spew these nonsense numbers. But and she did, of course, fib about her CV and about her private sector experience and all the rest of it. Said she'd never come back for more tax rises after the last budget, but she's doing it again. And yet she is possibly the best they've got, which would absolutely terrify people. I don't know if it's better if she goes or if someone else comes to replace her.
Sebastian, 12 months from now, who's the Chancellor?
I really hope it's Rachel Reeves. And for this reason, and I've probably said it to you before because I believe it so much, even if you hate Labour, even if you hate Rachel Reeves, the one thing we need right now, stability. We need one project to play out because we're so good at kicking out our chancellors, we're so good at kicking out our prime ministers. We need somebody to come and to deliver what they say they will do.
Sebastian Salek, thank you very much indeed. Labour councillor James Price, former special advisor to number 10 back in the last Tory government. Thank you to both of them. Are you feeling stable now? Because that was the word that Sebastian threw in there. Thoughts on all of that and the budget? 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news headlines now at 2 o'clock here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon, welcome back. We're still, is the word reeling? Well, we're not reeling. We were quite excited when the OBR dropped a massive financial clanger by telling us the budget half an hour before it actually happened. Of course, it did reveal 26 billion quid's worth of tax rises, frozen income tax thresholds, apparently raising £8 billion and pulling nearly 1 million people into paying tax, a record tax burden of 38% of GDP and real GDP growth averaging 1.5 to 0.3 points lower than expected. There's a lot to tuck into here. We'll talk to Isabel Oakeshott in just a second. Also, connected to the budget, it is driving, and drivers, of course, a bit of a backbone to a big part of our economy. Electric drivers now face a new per-mile road charge. Fuel duty is frozen. for now. And then, of course, there's rises with inflation. Pension salary sacrifice above a small cap will incur national insurance. High-value homes get a council tax surcharge. Property savings and dividend taxes go up. The sweetener, however, is that energy bills dip slightly as green levies shift to general taxation. I mean, that's just a sort of playing a game of optical illusion with the finances. We'll have more on that. And in other news, back to the other news agenda out there, David Lammy's plans to scrap most jury trials, keeping them only for the big cases such as murder, rape and manslaughter, and offences carrying over 5 years. This apparently is an attempt to cut 80,000 case backlog in the system. Leaked papers warn that failing to ease the gridlock risks a wider collapse of our justice system, but getting rid of juries is hugely controversial for obvious reasons. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. If you want to call us on this, that is our number at this end. I always think that when you have a budget from a Labour government, it's good to get a good die-hard socialist in the studio with us. So Isabel Oakeshott has jumped up to the task here.
Where's my tiffin? I heard them say that you get tiffin on your show.
Tiffin,
what was it?
yes.
Talk and tiffin and something else.
Were you
Where
ever familiar with the word tiffin?
Love a bit of tiffin.
Tiffin, yeah, we're all loving the tiffin.
Isn't that
these
basically
days.
a kind of hard chocolate brownie type thing?
You'd think it would be, but
It's not
apparently
that cakey.
it's some kind of synonym for chat.
Oh, I thought I was getting brownies. Anyway, there was
Bring the brownies in, please. Oakeshott needs some sugar.
That's my understanding of what tiffin is. Anyway,
we can't have brownies. They're probably going to be taxed.
There were no sweeteners in this budget,
Nothing.
were there? Really, apart from what you said about the losing of the green levies on these energy bills, which supposedly is going to save everybody 150 quid. I'll believe that when I see it. Do you know what's always? It's quite hard listening to these budgets. I've just sat through it and I was trying not to yawn. And I knew I shouldn't be yawning because what's in there is sort of technically quite interesting. But as often, it's what isn't actually in the speech that is most sort of interesting as a takeaway. So just as a couple of examples, the projected cost of the digital ID card scheme, which I know most of our listeners absolutely hate the idea of, that in the next 3 years will be something like 1.4 billion. And, you know, with these huge government projects, you always know that the actual amount that will cost will be a multiple of that.
3-4 times.
And then another thing that caught my eye from the small print is spending on asylum accommodation, which has more than tripled their projection for that. So, you know, the government's saying they're going to end the use of asylum hotels. Please, nobody should imagine that means spending is going to get any less. They originally projected 4.5 billion and it's gone up to something like 15. I mean, these are massive figures, and to put that in context, this surcharge they've announced today on what they call the high value home surcharge, that's only going to raise a few hundred million. I mean, it's 400 million by 2031. It's not coming in until 2028 if it ever comes in. And you know, you're sort of left wondering, is that even worth the grief? You know, the actual cost of valuing all these homes. I mean, plenty of people have a home that's sort of around about the high, nearly 2 million. I say plenty, of course, most people don't.
Well, it's funny, I had this message in from Tim. It's this interesting fact. In the last year, 1,434 homes have sold for more than £2 million across England and Wales, mostly in London. So up goes the rent. But of course, you can be accidentally in an expensive home. I keep using that example, but there's something in it that you might have bought a house in 1950 for for X amount of £1,000. It's now worth 2 million.
Absolutely. So it doesn't actually. My point is, it doesn't really raise much, you know. And I just wonder whether that's going to be worth the grief of all the revaluations and the challenges and so on. The things that got the big cheers. I mean, I was struck by the fact this morning I was woken up at 5:30 by the sound of tractors trundling down the embankment and on both sides of the river actually, and they were playing their klaxons. I was like, what on on earth's going on? Open the curtains, and there are a load of tractors. And I thought that was it was a remarkable show of defiance, because they'd been told not to come. And there they are now in central London, and there are farmers, as we speak, being arrested. And yet, in the chamber today, as Rachel Reeves reiterated the inheritance tax on agricultural land, her backbenchers cheered. And I thought that was a very, very bad look.
It's
indeed.
quite telling, though, isn't it, where the kind of spirit of this budget comes from. I think that's a great example that, those on the, people on the backbench never run anything in their life, have no real understanding of what it takes to encourage or get growth in an economy, and all of the factors that are relevant to that: personal responsibility, making sure that your kids can pick up some kind of legacy in order to continue, be it a business or whatever. They don't get, so it's the instinct is to kind of cheer at that. That's a good thing. Right?
Yeah,
it's a
completely.
good thing. We're going to tax the farmers.
There are farmers.
Because they're all rich old gits.
Where's the food going to come from, folks?
Well, indeed.
If we're not producing our own food, we're going to be importing more, which means that your food's going to cost more. So how is that a clever policy? I mean, most farmers are not making big returns at all. They're basically doing it because it's been in the family for such a long time. Anyway, we probably don't want to relitigate all of that, but I thought it was interesting, the reaction. And of course, the other big thing that they roared their approval at was the lifting of the 2-child limit on the child benefit cap. Rachel Reeves stood there and said that the limit at the moment drives children into poverty. And I thought, again, that struck me as really interesting, as if it is the lack of a benefit that drives families into poverty, rather than the responsibility of the parents to be able to give their children a
it's utterly bizarre,
upbringing.
that, isn't it? And also this kind of sort of statistical construct of what constitutes poverty. Nobody's going to dispute someone who is really in poverty. But I remember David Cameron, so when I was in the press gallery, you'll remember this, Isabel. Remember they would do these lunchtime speaker sessions where, somebody, usually very significant, would come along and give
press lunches.
The press lunches.
Yeah.
And this was David Cameron in opposition. And I remember him talking in very effective terms about poverty. So somebody comes up with the definition of poverty, and then a political party says, well, if we give you an extra 50p, you technically go over the line, then we can claim you are no longer in poverty. And that's why you get politicians sort of celebrating and preening their whiskers about this. And of course, what he was arguing was that actually the real game should be to ensure people aren't in poverty in the first place, and improve conditions for that to happen. But of course, that's where we're at now, is it? She mentioned pulling children out of poverty about 500 times in that budget. Again, playing that kind of moral card, which Labour do.
The words she used, I wrote them down. The policy pushes children into poverty. The lack of a benefit pushes children. No, that doesn't push children into poverty. The absence of that benefit may fail to make their lives better, but it's not responsible for the fact that those poor children are not getting what they need. On and on as well they go about breakfast clubs. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm sick of hearing about the breakfast clubs. It's not something that's going to make a huge difference to most of us. And these thresholds that have been frozen, frozen for years and years and years to come. So that it's going to hurt, folks, or everything that was announced today. I was struck that she did sound very robust today. I don't know what she had for breakfast, but she certainly sounded very different to the woman that we saw shedding tears famously earlier in this year. She had fire in her belly today, but the great question will be, to what extent does this unravel in coming days? What is there in the small print that hasn't yet been noticed? And this row over the unprecedented leaking of the budget, I think it was only half an hour beforehand, but there's feelings are running quite high on that one.
This is the classic of somebody pressing send before they were meant to. I mean, I'd imagine it sort of probably boils down to something like that. There will be an individual somewhere, I'm sure, who's sitting
having
with the
a very
HR
bad
department,
day at the office,
having a pretty bad day at the office. And you're right. She was fired. I was arguably the most animated I'd seen her. I noticed she kept referring to the speaker as Madame rather than Madam, as if we were in the Moulin Rouge, for goodness sake. I mean, what was going on there?
Did you also notice how much lower her voice seems?
She had done the Thatcher thing.
She really had.
She'd lowered it.
I remember when I started out as a political journalist, or maybe it was even before my time, there was a sort of scandal in the Commons about women politicians taking testosterone to make their voices lower. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I vaguely do. I remember Thatcher had coaching, didn't she? Apparently.
Yeah, but no, there was a testosterone
But this was actually
scandal.
taking the drug.
Yeah, that women were taking that to make them sound more manly in the chamber. I mean, we're going back a long way since then. I'm almost certainly showing my age there. But I was left thinking, first of all, such a story wouldn't run these days because it'd probably be deemed to be sexist.
When you said that, for some reason, the name Claire Short came to mind, and it only came to mind because she was a very kind of fiery character, wasn't she, in the Blair administration, who famously resigned over Iraq, I think it was.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'd not heard of the testosterone scandal, but I quite like it.
That was a thing. That was a thing.
Was there ever?
See, this is the advantage of getting older, and you've been around for a long time. You actually remember these weird stories.
Yeah, indeed. So she's now said, despite the fact that the overarching predictions for the economy is that growth has been downgraded. I mean, they're talking about it as a slight rise to 1.5%, which is nothing at all, but downgraded for the following 4 years. I mean, that's quite devastating. We had a Labour voice on a Labour councillor in the last hour. He said, but, and he pulled the old G7 card again and said, if you look at that, we're still going to be doing better than other countries. I'm not sure that's actually true any longer.
Well, I'm not even sure that we should just be comparing ourselves to those countries anyway. You've got to look at...
Countries that are doing badly.
Well, I think you need to look at, you need to look at the economies that are really firing ahead. And of course, if you start from a low base and you're suddenly accelerating, yes, that distorts the figures. So you get that kind of distortion with what, you might, in the old days, have called developing countries that are suddenly on a kind of acceleration growth. But if you look at the countries in the Middle East, for example, which are not poor countries, the GCC countries there, the Gulf Cooperation countries, you've got generally sort of 4% growth in the best performing economies there, and that is sometimes more than that. That should be what we're aiming for, rather than just saying, it's fine to be at 1% or 1.5 because that's better than the other, failing economies around us.
And there is a certain keeping your head above water moment. In fact, it's not just now. In fairness, the last Tory government had similar kind of fairly gloomy headlines to deal with as well. Which brings me on to this point, Isabel, and I don't think you've got skin in the game just because of your own personal circumstances, but I reference reform in this because there is a real sense, and we talked about it on the show yesterday, that what we need in our system, because we have the Tories and we have Labour, I know they're often referred to as the kind of uni party, and there's some mischief in that, I get it, but there are frightening similarities in the way things are done, and the civil service come up with a framework, and the minister, David Lammy and his jury thing, as if David Lammy came up with that idea. Somebody else did, and he just went on air and sold it, even though he'd previously said on many occasions we must keep juries. Except that's an obvious example of it. But I sense, and this is where I think Reform UK can make increasing gains in the polls, and potentially the big poll in 2029, because it needs the system. When I listen to Rachel Reeves, and having sat there in budgets as well as you have, it is a little bit, it's almost like we need a recalibration of how we do business.
Yeah, as if, I don't know whether reform would change something like the iconic budget speech, because I suppose you've got to read out all of this stuff, and it's all baked into, the whole thing about respect for the other MPs and the kind of legalities around voting through the budget and so on and so forth. But I think for the average voter, you're not going to sit and listen to all of that, are you? It would be nice if you could have a kind of simplified version, and it would be very nice if what you heard in that simplified version bore some resemblance to what people are feeling. And I think there's just such a disconnect, isn't there, between a Chancellor that stood up today. I think she sounded fantastic, honestly. She sounded so full of beans, so confident and authoritative. And yet the truth is we know the economy is tanking. One of the most terrifying things is what's happening to the jobs market, because she and her colleagues are making it so difficult and dangerous to hire people, particularly young people. You've got people like the caller that we had, a very powerful call to talk to Mark Dolan's show this morning. It was a mother of a young lad He's applied for about 40 jobs in the security industry, and I mean, she said he'll do anything, and he just can't get a job.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? You know, the mum sounded, very, very employable. So I'm sure if she's ringing talk and this is her story, her son is a good lad, he can't get a job. Why not? Because it is so expensive and so risky to hire people, particularly young people. And she made that a lot worse today.
I saw it just on that issue of, do we sort of need to reset how we function? I read an interview with Maurice Glassman, who was a former Labour man, really, I think, in his heart and all the rest of it, and did some work with, he's a life Labour peer, but he did some work with the Blair government, I think. He was arguing that, I don't want to paraphrase him too much, but he would close the Treasury. He'd put the Treasury literally in number 11. It should be in there.
Right.
Because of this civil service kind of cogwheel of doom that just kind of turns around.
Has he actually seen the size of the Treasury?
Yeah, I think you'd have to extend number 11.
I think maybe number 11 should go into the Treasury.
Maybe it should be that. But the point he was making is that the beating heart of it all needs to be more so in number 11. He wasn't enamoured by that.
More political in a sense. Then.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that decision as well, which I think he disagreed with when, remember Gordon Brown's first move as Chancellor with Blair was to give autonomy to the Bank of England. He thought that was a pretty lousy idea and has allowed politicians to take their hand off the brake, as it were. The point was, whether I agreed with him or disagreed with him, it was sort of, thinking outside the box.
Yeah, something has to change about the way we're doing this.
Correct. And I wonder whether that can be reform's key card in many ways.
I shall make inquiries and see what can be done.
If you wouldn't mind, yes. I'm sure we will have many reform politicians on over the next few days discussing exactly this. Listen, Isabel, thank you. Good to see you. Isabel Oakeshott with us here, Talks International editor, with a review, an overview of the budget. Over to you on this as well. 0344 499 1000. It's quite difficult to assess based on a budget that only happened or only completed itself less than an hour ago. But based on what you've heard and the headlines you've heard, what is your sense of this country, our direction? Is there any enthusiasm left? If so, put your hand up. We'd like to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
Lots coming in from you. Love this one that came in from Martin, who says, I've got bad news. Watching the budget on another feed. Absolutely outrageous. While you're interviewing your guests, and Rachel Reeves has just announced that income tax is to rise 98% for all citizens called Ian. Yeah, word on the street is she's going for Paul's next and then moving on to the Trevors. Thankfully, my name's Martin, so I've got some breathing space, but who knows how long. Callaghan would be proud of her. Is there nothing she won't tax on the most wafer-thin justification? Better get down to deed poll, Ian, says Martin in Whitley Bay. I love that. It's a good point, isn't it? This idea that sort of taxing things... I mean, I can understand... a regrettable tax. Look, we're absolutely stuffed. I mean, that would be... I'd rather hear that. We're absolutely stuffed, so we've got no choice but to lob some tax on it. But when politicians start arguing that tax has to be applied through some kind of moral crusade, then, frankly, I have the absolute instinctive desire to want to start gnawing off my own elbows. I don't think this moral card is... both laughable and dangerous, frankly, but that is the one that chancellors like to play. Let's get a word from David Buick, financial advisor and markets commentator at Aquis Exchange, of course. David, good afternoon to you. I don't want to ask you how many budgets you've sat through over the years. I know your eye is rarely off the ball. Just give us an assessment as to where this one sits, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Ian. But it goes back to about Ian MacLeod in the late 50s, but we'll leave that.
Impressed.
Let's just deal with the facts that we have been given today. I mean, that leap was outrageous, absolutely terrible, and that gave Kemi Badenoch raw meat, and she devoured it after the Chancellor's speech. But the whole question of the budget actually goes back to July, or actually wasn't it, October of last year, when she played down the country. Yeah. Sentiment and confidence is so important in an economy, which Isabel Oakeshott alluded to, and she's 100% right on that. And ever since then, she's been treading water. Now, we had a 40 billion tax increase for the last budget, and this time it's 26 billion. And the most important thing from my perspective is the market quite liked it, because she seems to have found somewhere a £21.8 billion headroom during the course of the next 5 years, and she believes she's going to be able to repay debt to get down significantly by the end of this administration. I wish her well. I'm not sure that it can actually be achieved. But the one thing this budget didn't do was do anything, as far as I'm personally concerned, for growth or for investment, or for anybody who is going to propel business, industry and commerce and employ people, which of course you and Isabel were talking about before. Yeah. I mean, the question of pensions is brutal to what they've done, because if anybody thinks in 20 years' time, if you have that sort of attack on pensions, that the public sector is going to be able to afford to pay the kind of pensions that they get through the public sector at the moment, dream on. It's just not going to happen. And that, to me, is really set the tone of where I thought this budget was actually going. I mean, I understand what she's done as regards some of the investment policies, because this government really has been without planning, and I think that's been part of their thing. But the idea of nuclear power, I respect that and like that. The idea of apprenticeships, paying for them, giving them free. But the way that she's thrown money around like confetti, by putting up basic wage and living wages, is just going to be more national insurance contributions, going to make employers put their hands in their pockets or under their armpits, and they're never going to come out. And if they think that this is going to be the way forward to be able to, you know, advance ourselves and get ourselves from what I call this stagnant GDP, which we've had, of around 1.5% during the course of the last 5 years, I've got news for her. It's just not going to happen. And that's what really has upset me more than anything else, is for the poorly paid who do need attention. I wish them well, and I'm glad they've got something out of it. But it's pathetic what they've done in cutting public expenditure. Absolutely pathetic. And that's, unless you cut public expenditure, you're never going to have growth.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, you know, just a cast iron, irredeemable fact, of course, which does sadly seem to elude some people. Dare I say, on the Labour benches more than anywhere else. However, just give us a little bit more detail, if you could, David, on this fiscal headroom that she's given herself. You talked about there being a slither of positivity in that. Janet and John style, if you can, David, explain that.
Well, they just think that inflation will come down and it will be aided and abetted by people having more disposable income. That, again, is in doubt and the rest of it. But, the economists believe that it is actually going to happen. It is that because you've got the thresholds stuck at the same level, added on for another 3 years, means that the more money that we get, even if the economy only stays where it is, at 1%, 1.5%, she will get a lot more money coming in than had been expected, despite the fact that business confidence is low. There is sufficient business out there to actually be able to maintain what she thinks she has, which will be to be able to see what I call the fiscal headroom. Either she'll be borrowing less than she has been to date, which means that could give her £21.5 billion to invest in the public sector.
We will watch with interest. This time, 12 months. Final question, David.
Yeah.
Where do you think we'll be? What will be the sort of vibe, the sense of UK PLC, where we are on the global stage, where we are with confidence, and where we are in terms of whether or not I can go out and have a good old pint of an evening?
Unfortunately, I think we're going to be in a bit of a vacuum. I think because we are failing to stimulate people. I mean, people like Lakshmi Mittal are leaving this country after 36 years.
Yeah.
If that doesn't send you some kind of a message, God help you. We've lost 10,600 millionaires, supposedly, gone, Malta, Italy, wherever it is. That gives you another message. What we have, or what we don't have, is what I call people who are prepared to take risk. We need risk managers. And if you actually pop a pin in their balloon of hope, you're never going to get them to spend the money and they're not going to stay here. It's such an important part. People think, well, it's all very well, you're relatively comfortable, you can do what you like, the rest of it. But I'm afraid a fact of life is that's where the future and employment comes from, is people who've got a little bit of cash behind them, the ability to be able to stimulate interest, to buy businesses or create businesses that employ people. And that's what this country is all about. And I'm afraid we've hit, not the buffers, but we've gone into neutral.
We're in that direction. David, as ever, thank you. Great to have you on with us. David Buick. He is, of course, financial advisor and markets commentator at Aquis Exchange. Thank you to him. Thank you to Paul in Luton as well. It says, Ian and Isabel, have to say, Kemi was on absolute bloody fire in her response. I didn't get a chance to see that. I know she described the budget as a total humiliation. And says the Chancellor is hiking taxes to pay for welfare. And it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't be hiking taxes to pay for welfare. I mean, if just think about that sentence, and that's where we're at. Could this be Kemi Badenoch's moment? Is this going to be the opportunity for her to turn a big corner? Paul says perhaps Starmer could do with a dose of testosterone as well, reference our previous conversation. And one from Phil, as child benefit is now for all children, does that mean we no longer need breakfast clubs, as the new benefit will apparently pull all children out of poverty? Brilliant point. Yeah, they're the Chancellor's own words, going to pull the kids out of poverty. Well, do you therefore need another freebie in the Breakfast Club? The list goes on. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news. There's going to be a fair bit of it this afternoon in response to this. Of course, the fallout from a budget, as you will, I'm sure you're ahead of me on this. I know those that follow and listen to talk take notice of this kind of stuff. It's usually in the next 12 hours when the bean counters have come in, these kind of nomadic figures that turn up post-budget every year to really get down and drill into the finer financial details of what's been announced. Almost always, the headlines are never quite as rosy as they were portrayed at the dispatch box, even though, and Isabel made the point, I mean, neither myself or Isabel Oakeshaw would be natural fans of Rachel Reeves, but she was kind of, in Reeves' terms, she was sort of on fire there. There was certainly something in the pit of the belly when it came to delivering her big speech, even though it had already been announced half an hour before she started. But that's not enough, of course. It's the detail that counts. So watch this space as to what it means in reality as it all unfolds. We'll have some more from you as well on the way. John O'Connell from the Taxpayers Alliance is going to join us too to get an overview of what it means for you and me, the pound in the pocket, as it were. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This comes in from Chris, who says, I had 4 children but didn't expect the government to support me. The taxation system didn't help me at all. And I think look, we all get the, fall on hard times thing. But I don't think that was really the idea that the Tories only introduced the cap out of, as Rachel Reeves was trying to kind of, the usual sort of left-wing mischief thing, trying to suggest it was because she doesn't care about kids, because they didn't care about kids in poverty. There's all that kind of mumbo-jumbo and dodgy nonsense gets wheeled out by people from parties such as Labour. And therefore it was a moral crusade. We're helping people who've fallen on hard times. Well, I mean, we have systems in place for people who fall on hard times. But this was just an extraordinary moment today that for many people, and there are 1 or 2 voices on the Labour side, that quietly, they will only whisper it, and they certainly wouldn't say it in public, that totally understood what the 2-child cap was all about. It's not family allowance, it's not your child benefit. It is just your ability to be able to tap into universal credit after your 2nd child. And that was what was at odds here. What does it all mean, though, for the tax? Ultimately, how well off are we going to be come a year down the line? Let's talk to John O'Connell, CEO of the Taxpayers Alliance. Good afternoon to you, John. We had Isabel Oakeshott with us a moment ago. If we were assessing this on a kind of Britain's Got Talent basis, we might give Rachel Reeves some house points for delivery. She was certainly fiery. In terms of content, I think she'd be getting 4 red buzzers.
Yeah, and a 5th, if you could fit a 5th one in. It's an absolute disaster for taxpayers, for families, for businesses, for anybody who gets up off the sofa and goes to work for a living. It's an absolute disaster. We're seeing a hike in the tax burden to its biggest level on record. So it's just bad news all round. And it does seem to me as if there is just a very deliberate pitch from the Labour Party at the moment to be the party of welfare, as opposed to, the clues in the name, the Labour Party. It's not really about work anymore, because if you are doing the right thing and you're saving for a pension so that you're not such a burden on the state in later life, you do anything to sort of look after yourself and your family away from the prying eyes and the greedy hands of the state, then they want to come after you.
And that was kind of evidence, really. There was a moment, I don't know if you spotted this, John, when she talked about inheritance tax and agriculture, and the big cheers on the Labour benches for this. And I thought, what an extraordinary thing to cheer for. You'd only really be cheering for that if you knew absolutely jack about business and how things work and what makes a country grow, etc. But of course, that really does feed into the frenzy of left-wing thinking, that their belief is that if you tax stuff, particularly farmers, because they're all rich and their cupboards are stuffed with bags of cash, etc. They have this sort of stereotype, a stereotype that in any other walk of life would probably get you 2 years in jail, but they're quite happy to do it with people who they think's got a few quid or have worked a little bit harder.
Yeah, and in many cases, farmers don't actually have a few quid.
Well, that's very true.
The way that farms are financed, it means that they're often on salaries that are well below the median. Probably even below minimum wage. In a lot of cases, that they do it because they love it. They do it for a sense of duty and commitment and patriotism, and it's been going through generations and generations of their family. And this is, as you say, the cheers from Labour backbenches are frankly disgusting when it comes to stuff like this, because we're talking about a very particular British way of life that's come under sustained assault since July 2024, and it's all there in black and white. We can all see it now. We can all see the charts showing how much we're all going to be paying for welfare to go up, and that's the bottom line here. We've got people who are working hard, and then if you look at some of the specific proposals, taxing salary sacrifice pensions, and the reason that people put so much into salary sacrifice pensions is because of the tax and benefit system to start with. There's a cliff edge when somebody when their income goes above £100,000, where their personal allowance is withdrawn, which means that their marginal rate goes up above 60%. There's also the nursery and childcare fees, which you can get if you're on below 100,000. So of course, families, on around those kinds of levels use salary sacrifice schemes. So the only reason they do it is not to squirrel money away from, hard up benefit claimants. It's because the tax and benefit system is already punishing them. So they're being punished again on the back of already being punished.
Yeah, and of course the reality is that people who are worth a few quid already pay an extraordinary amount of tax in terms of total amount as well as the individual amount. Typically they will take less out of the system as well, but of course none of that really counts for anything. You mentioned the word wealth. I mean, she threw in the sort of Mayfair mansion as almost like a typical example of what she's doing with council tax. It seems rather blind to me, but I guess that the way we could write it off, John, is that, it is the Labour Party. They are unapologetically the Labour Party. Some will proudly call themselves socialists, and in that respect, I suppose it was a socialist budget.
Yeah, maybe that's absolutely true, but it flies in the face of what they were saying in the run-up to the election in July 2024, when they were openly saying, we will not increase council tax. Farmers, you do not need to worry. Going on big charm offensive with businesses. Growth was their number one main objective. Yeah, all of that was either deliberate sort of mistruths, or they maybe they do think that they're going to achieve growth somehow, but they've just gone about it in completely the wrong way. In fact, if you're going to design a way to upend growth and cripple business, this is the way to do it. The last two budgets have been an absolute disaster for families and households and businesses all across the country. And
of course, manifesto breaches as well, because it happened last time when they increased employee national insurance, because that was a tax on working people, those that run small businesses. But this time, I think this threshold business, we can't really let them get away with this. This is a tax rise. You got 780,000 more people into the basic rate, 920,000 more into the higher rate. This is a tax rise. That's a break of their manifesto pledge.
Yeah, and a tax rise on working people that, they've tried to come up with, because they use this phrase in the run up to the election, we will not increase taxes on working people. They then tried to work out what that actually meant, and they've tried all sorts of different ruses for it. But of course, everybody knows that they're increasing taxes on working people, income taxes through the frozen thresholds. Even the one that I just mentioned on salary sacrifice, that is an increase of national insurance on working people. It just is. So they've broken the manifesto pledges several times over. But sleight of hand from politicians. Yes. Quelle surprise.
Yeah, indeed. John, on that point, thank you very much. Great to have you on. John O'Connell, he is the CEO of the Taxpayers Alliance, with some reality of what that was. That is the only kind of positive, no, it's not even a positive, the only kind of reasoned observation you could have is that they are the Labour Party, and it was quite a Labour budget. Nothing on cutting spending, really. No real message that the welfare bill it's such a level of heady blindness on the part of the Chancellor and the government. I'm not talking about all the other departments. There's loads of other departments. Just this one, welfare, work and pensions, and all that goes with it. It is off the scale, and it will implode at some point. What is her answer? To add to it. To add to it. Ashley is down in London. Ashley, welcome to Talk. What have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Afternoon. I'm just trying to digest myself how much money I've lost in the last few hours, or going to. I wanted to talk initially the car thing. I'm one of these people that got told to buy diesel, bought diesel. I'm the one that got told buy a EV. I bought an EV, and I've already got the rich tax on it, and it won't change on my car.
Okay.
3 pence per mile. Whatever, okay, on top of everything else, probably going to cost me another £400 a year, on top of the 650 quid or whatever it is a year for my road tax. The thing that made me laugh really is this whole thing with the plug-in hybrids, and all right, it's half the amount, but why in 2028 would anyone go and buy a plug-in hybrid instead of buying just a pure petrol car? Yeah. It just makes no sense, does it? Because it's like, well, okay, you can still buy an electric petrol car. You're not taxed anymore on it. You're not going to pay per mile unless they intend changing it. It's just a completely stupid thing. I'm not. you look at the strategy, and if they would have scrapped road tax and said, look, we need a fairer system on it, and I don't disagree with that, because EVs not paying, petrol cars paying.
Sure.
They should have just wiped out road tax full stop and just done and gone the whole hog with pay per mile, and a different rate for a good emission car and a bad price for one that pumps loads of bad stuff into the air.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the electric cars would still get charged, but they would be charged at a lesser rate because of their
people would still buy them. And this is the key point: is that people, at this point in time, it's stopping people, going to stop people buying them.
Yeah.
They've got Euro 7 coming for petrol cars, and a lot of manufacturers have started stopping producing certain models because of this, because they don't want to invest in it, because they've had to invest in EV. And then all of a sudden they're going to slow the whole market down. And that just then, it's a whole chain of effects with suppliers. They're not going to be supplying the parts, and the car's not going to be sold, and the dealerships that try to sell the cars can't sell them. And it's just, they can't get that right. I'm not sure what else that they're going to get right. Landlords are being hammered now with additional taxation on money that they earn. In truth, if you've got one or two properties, I'm not talking about institutionalised people who've got hundreds and thousands, the odd person that's got one or two, you were barely earning maybe 3% on your returns on that anyway. I mean, what's going to happen? You're going to have to put the rent up to actually be able to afford to pay for it, to pay your tax. So the person that's in the rental property is actually going to end up having to pay more money at some point anyway. So it's just really badly thought out, and pushing stuff down the road till 2028 and just hope it gets better. And
I think that's exactly it. Is sort of lick your finger and stick it in the wind moment, isn't it? I thought hopefully things will increase. Economies which are parts of the economy which are out of the government's control will naturally do their thing, and the markets will right any wrongs. And we can all sit here in a couple of years' time and go, we remember the bad times, and now we're all in a fantastic situation.
They forget it's us, small business owners and medium-sized business owners, that make the world go round business-wise in this country. And they forget the fact that it's not them that actually creates the business and the money. It's us that creates it. They have to set the environment for us to be able to achieve it. And what they do is that they basically, tie a weight around your ankle and then chuck you in the Thames and say, see if you can swim.
Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of how it feels, but there you go.
Well, your ankle, if you're lucky, it could be elsewhere for some, and that's not a nice thought. Ashley, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Ashley down in London. This comes from Will in Liverpool. He says, afternoon, Ian. I don't understand the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. We're going to lift more kids out of poverty, only to put them back into poverty once they've started working, because they're going to be taxed more than ever. Well, that's very true. You see, it doesn't... The two-child benefit, the scrapping of that was done to try and save Keir Starmer's skin. No other reason. That's why that policy exists. A British Chancellor of the Exchequer stood up and scrapped a policy in order to help her mate keep his job. Because those backbenchers, those really on the left, and I tell you what, 2024... July the 4th, that intake of 411 Labour MPs or whatever it was, these were not your moderate kind of original Blairite types. This was a crock of essentially more Corbyn thinkers. You only got to listen to these guys in inch. There's one or two outside the box, of course there are, and they're usually the people that are worth listening to a little bit. But broadly speaking, a leadership challenge is all but guaranteed for Keir Starmer. Possibly before the May elections, but certainly after them, because there's no projection or polling out there anywhere that says that Starmer's going to come out of this in any other way but total annihilation. And that will certainly start the chain of events. Of course, he will then be able to go, but look, we scrapped the two-child benefit. That's what you lot like, isn't it? We've done everything you wanted us to do. But, of course, the issue of poverty, the word poverty, which, depending on which think tank you listen to, depends on how you define poverty. It's a fairly random thing. It's not like some solid barometer that can literally decide. There are some obvious equations. If you've got X coming in, X going out, etc., and no other means of increasing Y, then therefore you are officially in poverty. But as I quoted the David Cameron thing a little earlier, you can be in that position where you're in poverty for X amount of time, and 50p A week will technically tip you out of poverty according to the charts. And David Cameron's point back in the day was that, well, that's not really taking somebody out of poverty. That's a sort of an artificial movement. Taking somebody out of poverty is making sure they stay out of it and they can grow to never be back in it again. And the conditions have got to be ripe and correct so that families can grow and secure their kind of security and safety. Just dipping somebody over this artificial line isn't really the definition of taking somebody out of poverty. You know, it's not like trading places where you're going to suddenly remove somebody from a certain set of circumstances, or one of those kind of, what was that, wife swap or something. You know, somebody experiences a completely opulent life. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on the budget from Tina McKenzie, MBE, Chair and Policy and Advocacy at the Federation of Small Businesses, joining us live from College Green. Tina, good afternoon to you. Of course, small often gets missed, this point. People talk about the Amazons and the Googles of this world and how much they give to the economy and to jobs. But of course, it's small businesses that actually prop up the UK economy. It's been the case for years. It's a fact worth mentioning because it often gets missed. And how do you sense small businesses are going to cope after what you've heard the Chancellor say today?
Well, you make a really good point. 65% of all that GDP coming into the UK is from the small and medium businesses. Most of the more than 50%, 65% of all the private sector employment. And we know 99% of the firms are small and medium. So the Chancellor's got a real problem with economic growth, and there's nothing in this budget that's going to help her with that. And that's a real shame because it's a real missed opportunity.
Is it going to cost small businesses more? I mean, it's all very well raising the minimum wage, and we have an understanding of that, although interestingly above the rate of inflation, which I think some people were quite surprised about. But of course, the person that pays the wage is the business.
Well, interestingly, yes, so there was that increase in the minimum wage. There's other increases coming, so they've increased the statutory sick pay, so that'll be from day one, and there's really no help to help small employers with that. We encouraged the Chancellor to increase the employment allowance to a similar degree. She chose not to do that. To maybe give a statutory sick pay rebate to small businesses, she chose not to do that either. She also chose to freeze the thresholds, so it may look like you're getting 50p more per hour, but as those thresholds hold and inflation potentially goes up higher, then you're not really getting more money. So all round, I think there's a bit of pain all round for everybody, and it's just such a shame that there's nothing in there to really help those small businesses. Now, she did mention on the positive side that guarantee scheme for young people to get into work. We're waiting to see the detail of will she cover some of the wages for that for the small businesses. She also said she would cover the training of apprentices for small business as well. So there's some things in there that will help, but actually overall to get more small businesses investing more, putting more of their hard-earned cash into businesses where every which way they look it's being taxed more, then really she's not going to get that push that she wants from all of those businesses up and down the country.
Yeah, and that, of course, was key and crucial. Tina, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Tina McKenzie, Chair of Policy and Advocacy for the Federation of Small Businesses. She was live at College Green. The noise you could hear behind her were the farmers' protest. There's almost a protest going on each corner of the green, it seems, right now. There's a lot of disquiet out there with the budget. Fiscal headroom was the one bit that David Buick, the financial commentator, gave us earlier that could be seen as a positive on the markets for the Chancellor. That's all yet to play out. We will see how it does. And it does seem that she's relying on a bit of goodwill and a prayer as to how the economy naturally progresses, how the circumstances and the surroundings nationally and internationally improve. Are we likely to then suddenly find ourselves in a year's time going, do you know what, actually I feel all right, yeah, the economy's doing pretty good. Look, unemployment's, gone down again, so that's a good thing, and taxes, a bit busy, they might come down at the next budget. Are you feeling any of that? Matt's in Cheshire on this point of the budget. What are you thinking, Matt? Afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. It's not so much about the economic side of it, but just the tone and the content of it. It reeked of... my friend had a pony, but my dad couldn't afford to buy me one. And
yes,
I know the budget is meant to be part performative, but this was near psychotic, like laughing, joking, patting themselves on the back, while 85% of the country despises them. Is it any wonder Britain's in tatters with such delusional, self-congratulatory failures in high office? And let Labour have their pathetic, confected final moments of parliamentary fun at the public's expense. We'll not see them again in my lifetime. As for Reeves, it was a telling insight into her own insecurities and memories of her own background. Most people I know are working class, are proud to be working class, and she's obviously ashamed of her past, and it shows through her abilities.
I think her I keep referring to the number crunchers, Matt, who will, be drilling down as we speak into the even finer detail. And we've already exposed, some of the truth behind those announcements. There will be people out there who are obvious lefties, and that's fine. As I always seem to say, it's not North Korea, it's a democracy. You can be a lefty if you want to be. We'll be patting her on the back. But the bit I do find uncomfortable, as I said earlier, is this kind of cheering, we are going to put more tax, the inheritance, agriculture, all that. Hey, that's brilliant, The idea that taxing people who've made a few quid is a point of celebration is not just obnoxious, it's almost criminal.
Well, that's their mindset from childhood.
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely.
They carry their insecurities of their childhood into their adult life.
Yeah.
And can I just add before I go, Ian, Kemi Badenoch was absolutely electric, vicious, snarling, on the money, I know you said you didn't see it, but I would call it the parliamentary performance of the year so far.
Well, we are going to play a little bit of that in the next section because many of you, and thank you, Matt, for that, have reminded us that apparently, yeah, it was an incredible innings from the Conservative Party leader. We'll have some detail on that. Paul in Birmingham says, you think it's bad now? Angela Rayner will be the next Prime Minister and Ed Miliband will be the Chancellor. Oh, Paul, why did you have to spoil our afternoon even more? I was about to have a cup of tea and a rich tea biscuit, for goodness sake. We'll open up the lines and keep those comments coming in. 0344 499 1000, responding to Budget 2025. Right now, the time is 3 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense, our third hour. Loads of comment and opinion coming through. Lots of great guests as well. We'll be speaking in a moment to the Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury to get a Conservative response to what's been happening at Westminster, the greatest leaked budget in history. And, of course, it was the OBR that accidentally published the budget about an hour early. Extraordinary stuff. We had the detail before the Chancellor had even opened her mouth. We knew about the income tax threshold position. We knew about GDP, the record tax burden, etc. We'll get some response from the Tories in just a moment. Also within that budget, electric car drivers now face a new per-mile road charge. Fuel duty, however, is frozen for now. That's the 15th year on the trot. And, of course, there are rises in inflation. Pension salary sacrifice above a small cap will incur a national insurance rate. High-value homes get a council tax surcharge, and property, savings and dividends all going up. There was a sweetener about green levies on your energy bills that might save you a few quid a year, but don't hold your breath. And in other news, away from the budget, David Lammy's plans to scrap most jury trials, suggesting, of course, keeping just murder, rape and manslaughter and those offences that would carry over 5 years for a jury, but the rest to be decided by a judge or a magistrate. This is in order to cut an 80,000 case backlog. This is according to leaked papers, but it appears to be a very big idea in David Lammy's office. We'll speak to one senior barrister with his views on what he thinks of all of this. All of that, and of course, your comments on the way. How has the budget affected you? Your response to Rachel Reeves, 0344 499 1000. And of course, after Rachel Reeves had finished, it is the opposition parties that make their comments known. Ed Davey talked about you can't tax your way out of anything. Obvious stuff. He's an opposition party leader, of course. But it seems that star of the week is going to Kemi Badenoch, who had a cracking innings at the dispatch box, really stirring the pot on social media with her response to the Chancellor's budget. Let's have a listen to what the leader of the opposition had to say.
All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female. They're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Pulling no punches there. Let's speak with James Wilde MP, Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. James, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. Well, it does seem there's certainly a lot of love for your leader at the moment, with a very robust response to Rachel Reeves' budget this afternoon, even though we actually all read it an hour before. But nonetheless, give us your assessment, if you would, and I'm sure you're going to echo much of what Kemi Badenoch had to say, but what did you make of the big Reeves budget 2025?
Well, it was a strong performance for Kemi, and I think she was channeling the anger that people listening to this feel at what the Chancellor's done. Once again, she's put up taxes, £26 billion this time, due to the failure of her policies a year ago. And she's broken the promise she made not to increase the income tax threshold. She said last year that would hit working people taking money out of their pay slips, and then she didn't even apologise for breaking that promise. So what we've seen is greater taxes to fund more welfare spending. I think those are the wrong choices. We spend £1.3 trillion as a country. We can certainly make some savings. We've identified £47 billion worth, and then you wouldn't be putting up taxes, you wouldn't be stifling enterprise, and you wouldn't be hitting people in their pockets.
And nothing on cutting spending, and I think that was the bit. I mean, look, I know it's the Labour Party, and we can argue not unreasonably, you know, that's what a sort of socialist thinking would instinctively do. However, you know, she had previously given a go at reducing, in fact, it wasn't even reducing the welfare budget, it was just reducing the rate of growth of the welfare budget, and that, of course, got hounded out of town by her backbenchers. So there was no real revisiting to anything that even suggested cutting the enormous amount of money we spend on key areas, particularly welfare.
Exactly. If you're a family, you need to cut your cloth according to what's coming in. There's no sense of that with her. I think she's desperate to protect her position and keep her backbenchers on side. Increasing welfare when it's already unsustainable is simply the wrong choice, and making hard-working people pay for increased benefit spending is just not the right way to be going to it. But I think it's in Labour's DNA to take that approach, rather than looking at how can we reduce spending, get better value for money for the taxpayer. Instead, we've had that big income tax threshold tax increase, then a whole smorgasbord of other tax rises as well, whether it's the price of alcohol duties going up, your gambling's going up, everything's going up. I did laughingly say, where's the window tax? And I was worried I'd given her a good idea.
Well, you might have done. I mean, you seem to have a chorus as well accompanying you this afternoon, James. Does that go with you wherever you go these days?
Gladly not. I think it's a few people who don't accept the EU referendum result from 2016.
Yeah, it might well be that. I think there's a few farmers thrown in as well. Just give us a sense of the mood in the House of Commons then, because this was an extraordinary budget for many reasons. It had already leaked like an industrial sieve for about a fortnight beforehand, and then, goodness me, in something that you really couldn't write. The OBR went and released it before she'd even got in her ministerial car.
Yeah, I mean, an utter shambles. And then we had the farce of Rachel Reeves not reading out the figures that we'd all seen. That every year of the growth forecast has been downgraded now as a result of this budget, but she didn't read out those figures, funnily enough. Inflation's going to be higher, unemployment is going to be higher. All the indicators you want to see are going in the wrong direction. We need to get on the side of the small businesses, the people going out, working hard, creating jobs for other people and support them, not keeping the tax burden on them and on families as high as it is, and it's going up even to record higher levels. So this is a very disappointing budget, and the whole process has been a total shambles. We've seen companies holding off on investment because of the uncertainty, people worried about their savings, about their pension, and now we know quite how bad it is, and it's as bad as we all feared it might be.
Is this the point where the Conservative Party turn it around? I mean, I'm really thinking about the big response from your leader, from Kemi Badenoch, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, social media seemed to be fairly enamoured with that and thought it was rather positive. But, of course, you know, whatever you guys say, you're in a very bad position right now, certainly in the polls, and it looks as if Reform UK might form the next government. So is this the start of the return of the Tories?
Yeah, I believe it is. We've set out a clear position on the economy. We're the only party talking about living within our means, controlling spending and supporting business. Even some of the other parties, you'd expect the Lib Dems to, but some of the other parties, Reform, they're backing lifting the two-child cap. They're backing increased welfare spending. I don't think that's the right choice. All of the opinion polls show that the public support that cap remaining in place because it's fair for families on benefits to make the same decisions and choices as families who aren't on benefits about the size of their families. That's a point of fairness. So I think as a party we are making the argument. You saw Kemi did that very strongly in the House today, and we'll keep doing that across the country, talking to people and talking to businesses about how we can create an economy and an environment where they can actually succeed. So yeah, that's what the Conservative Party is about. It's great to have refreshing, clear Conservative principles once again to the fore.
James, on that point, thank you, sir. Great to have you with us. James Wild, MP, Shadow Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, accompanied by, we think that was Steve Bray. He's the fellow that wears the hat who didn't like Brexit very much and went around the place hounding lots of MPs. We think that was him. But there were some farmers earlier honking their horns, and that was great to hear. We referenced there quite a lot about Kemi Badenoch. Seems to have had a bit of a moment in the House of Commons this afternoon in response to the budget. Really came into her own, many suggesting she was, quote, on fire, not literally, in the House of Commons. Let's have another listen to her really telling it like it is and her assessment on Rachel Reeves.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever chancellor.
There it is. You might expect that from the leader of the opposition. Was that enough for you to convince you? Oh, I know I went to Reform, but actually the Tories are back and Kemi's got it all sorted, so I will vote blue after all. Is that what you're thinking? 0344 499 1000. Lots of comment coming in from you. We'll do some more messages in just a moment. First, let's get some voice notes of views from around the UK.
What an absolute simpleton. I've had enough. We're leaving. We're not millionaires. We're never going to be millionaires while we're in the UK. It's an absolute dump, and they're just making it worse.
My opinion, I don't know. I don't agree with the left's policy there. We're just throwing money at them. They're being quite wasteful.
All they care about is saving their own skins, and that's all this budget was about. saving Rachel from accounts and two-tier Kia. That's Labour in a nutshell.
We've all got to be in it together. Well, if we was all in it together, why has there been no benefit cuts and just rises? Well, we're not all in it together.
It doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter, mate. It matters to us because it's our money and it ain't their money. That's why it doesn't matter to them, because it ain't their money.
Thank you guys for that. You heard Rod, you heard Mike, Darren, Mac and Sean. You want a voice note? 0344 499 1000. This in from Keith in Durham. It says, afternoon Ian. As expected, Rachel from accounts lifting the 2-child benefit cap. Family with 6 kids will be getting extra £14,000 a year. That is more than a pensioner gets in state pension. That cannot be right. And that was kind of rather the spirit that the original cap was introduced in. I mean, there are places that, do you remember there used to be the old gag, the how do you make an Eastern European laugh? Tell them about the British welfare system. And that might have been back in the early 2000s, because many people came from countries in Eastern Europe in particular and just couldn't quite believe. I remember listening to a Polish woman, this is about 20 odd years ago, who couldn't believe you got paid when you had a baby, that the government pay you when you have a baby. So you have a baby, they pay you. So you get money when you're not at work. So you get paid not to go to work, and then you get more pay for the kids. And she said, if you went back to where I'm from, and it's very much changed in Poland, but she said that would just be ludicrous. Now, nobody is suggesting there's no such thing as welfare, but I think we're all suggesting there is such a thing as a level. And the 2-child benefit cap came in, not because George Osborne hated children. It came in because there was a sense that it was unfair. And it was unfair that working people were paying non-working people to have another child. Now, I know that's a very crass way of interpreting it, and there are more nuances and complexities to it, but there is broadly that assessment that can be made, and that can't be right. Why is it always for the state? That's what the left, they can't get their head. Listen to those crowing and cheering on the back benches every time they talked about getting rid of a tax like this or raising a tax in a certain area. They've got a few quid, let them pay more. Agriculture, let them pay more. Got a big house in London, let them pay more. Big cheers from these horrendous, I mean, seriously, horrendous. There's something, they're ill, these people. Cheering it along because it makes them feel better, because that's all socialism ultimately is. It's a sense that you believe you're a nicer person because of it. It's beyond bizarre, it's completely anti-intellectual, it's counter-instinctive, but it's a desired sign-up belief that eventually becomes part of the very marrow of your being, and you can't lose it, you can't get rid of it. Many of us had it when we were like 17 or 18 and felt a bit rebellious, so therefore a little bit kind of Che Guevara going on, some Citizen Smith perhaps. But when you grow up, you realise the ridiculousness of that kind of thinking. It doesn't hold any water, not long term. But it's so seductive, it's like flipping heroin to those red backbenchers. They love every they can't get enough of it. Agriculture, farmers, yeah. House in Mayfair, stick a tax on it, mate. Tax the swines. They don't for 1 second sit down and work. Oh, and we're going to give away another 15 billion quid to people who aren't working but decide to have another child. Hey, that's fantastic, isn't it? No! Stop it. It isn't. And if that's the way you look at it, you miss everything. You miss the way you grow an economy, you miss the real sense of fairness, and you also miss the real sense of what a civilised benefit system should be doing. We should never be creating dependency cultures, and that's exactly what we're doing here. Rachel says, not that Rachel, a different Rachel, the 2-child benefit cap is, I think, a huge mistake. You're going to get people on benefits having more kids to stay at home and claim more benefits. It's going to make more people lazy. Well, you do develop that dependency culture issue, which is a big, big issue around this. Tim says, Tim's in Suffolk, Rees has conned everyone. No more tax based on 48-hour weeks. The new minimum wage will be £29,283.84. That's an extra £4 a day. But oh yeah, extra tax will pay for it. That's a very good point. And Louis from Fowley says, the only thing I agreed about Rachel was what she said about Zach Polanski. I missed that, but I must look back at it. any pop at Zach is never a bad thing, surely. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to the chief economist from WPI Strategy in a moment, Martin Beck. He'll give us his assessment of Rachel Reeves and Budget 2025. This is Talk. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Let's move then to get more comment from the budget. It was only a couple of hours ago now. Rachel Reeves was in full swing. A budget that, of course, slightly unusually, we were all aware of the detail. Everything was there. We knew everything because the OBR accidentally hit the send button, one assumes, and out it popped before she'd even jumped in her ministerial car. So we had some notice, and that, of course, was on top of the weeks of notice we'd had with all of these kind of drip leaks that had taken place. So we've got the broad idea of what was going to happen. Let's speak with Martin Beck, Chief Economist at WPI Strategy. Good afternoon to you, Martin. I mean, we did have an idea of what it was going to look like. In that respect, were there any surprises for you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I think, as you say, all of the measures in the budget were leaked in advance or preempted, so they didn't come as a surprise. I think what was surprising was the size of the so-called fiscal black hole. So before the budget, we'd been warned that the Chancellor might have to raise taxes by 20, 30, 40 billion pounds to fill this black hole, to achieve her fiscal rules. In the event, the OBR gave her a break. The OBR thinks that the nature of what limited growth we'll get in the economy over the next few years will be more tax rich. So each pound of GDP will generate more tax revenues. And as a result, the margin that she had to fill was much smaller than expected. So the fiscal position is a bit more resilient now, though, but as you've been talking about earlier, it does mean even more tax rises and a tax burden heading into the highest record.
What is it all dependent on? We were talking to David Buick, a little name I'm sure you're familiar with, who also made this point about fiscal headroom and the like. But of course, other circumstances have to come into play, both nationally and internationally.
Well, that's right, and bear in mind, public spending by the end of the decade will be £1.5 trillion.
Is that all?
So even a small change in growth or inflation or it could even though the Chancellor's got more of a margin against the fiscal rules now, that margin could easily be eroded just by a small change in some of the OBR's assumptions around the economy.
Is there an irredeemable reality, though, about spending in this country, Martin? I mean, the welfare budget is the obvious example. I mean, we could go through the departments one by one if we wanted to, but that particular area, which looks to be, in fact, some would claim, as a matter of fact, is completely unsustainable going forward. It simply cannot. It has to. It's just the law of mathematics. It has to implode at some point.
I mean, in a dynamic economy, we want to be lowering taxes on workers rather than raising them. And at the moment, we're raising taxes on workers and transferring that money to people on the welfare budget, out of the welfare budget. And as you say, I don't think that's sustainable in the long run. But there's you can do a lot of damage to an economy before things get so bad that you need radical change. And unfortunately, I think we're in a position now where things aren't bad enough, where things are just about sustainable and tolerable, to avoid the need to do anything dramatic or radical.
And of course, it's all about confidence, isn't it? I mean, confidence is always key to any economy. If there is a sense that the wobbles have taken hold, then everybody starts running for the hills, whether it's banks or industry. People cut employing people because they're a bit concerned. House prices do strange things. And of course, with this, we did have tax rises within this. I mean, they happen in that kind of sneaky threshold sort of way, but they are nonetheless, if you're somebody who's suddenly thinking, well, I'm going to earn a few more quid, yep, you might, but you could be one of the 780,000 people that have now been introduced to income tax. You could be one of the 920,000 people that have just been introduced to a higher tax rate. As far as all those people are concerned, that's a tax rise.
Of course, and higher taxes, they're a bad thing for the economy. As you kind of imply, they damage incentives. They damage the ability or desire to, get promoted, get a pay rise, start a business. So, the money from these tax rises is going to someone else. Ultimately, it will stay in the economy. But I think there's an efficiency cost to raising taxes more and more. And we're beginning to see the consequences of that now. We've got very sluggish growth. The OBR's forecast for growth for the next few years is very weak, and higher taxes aren't going to help that.
Indeed. If we look back to July last year, remember July the 4th, of course, 411 new Labour MPs all pitched up in Westminster with their newly polished shoes and their excited faces. And then it was a week or two later, Rachel Reeves came out with some very grim news. She'd gone all archaeological bound on the spreadsheets and the books and discovered there was 22 billion quid that had gone amiss, and she needed to fill this big fiscal black hole. That, of course, is now, grown a little more, and depending on who you listen to will depend on which figure you believe. Has this budget done anything to alleviate that? Because that was always central. It was almost like a mantra, the 22 billion back or the 30 billion, whatever it happened to be. Can Rachel Reeves now address this as a direct result of this budget, Martin?
I think in some respects that the margin of safety she's got against the fiscal rules is now bigger than it was in March, for example. It's now 20 billion rather than 10. But as we were saying earlier, £20 billion sounds like a lot of money, but when you're spending £1.5 trillion, that margin could be easily eroded. So the fear, I guess, is that in 6 months or a year's time, she'll be coming back with more tax rises. Are we in a fiscal doom loop where we're destined for ever more tax increases, weaker economy, weaker public finances, etc.?
And where do you sense we sit internationally? Because these constant references to G7, I've had a couple of sort of Labour guests mention it this afternoon. Things are tough, but it's not as tough as some countries out there. Where do we sit kind of on the international league table, as it were? Are we Wolves or are we Arsenal?
I think we're in the middle of the league, probably. All the major European economies are very sluggish, they're very stagnant, they've got fiscal problems. On the other hand, you've got the US, which, okay, it's borrowing a lot of money, but it's very dynamic, it's growing quickly, it's getting energy prices down. There's an attitude there that it would be good if we could try and adopt. But I think as things stand, with taxes going up and this endless focus on the public finances and fiscal black holes. We're a long way from emulating the United States.
Yeah, it hasn't made you rethink your career as an economist, has it, Martin? I mean, you'll be howling at the moon at this rate with this kind of news.
I think it's always good. It's always good for us when there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. And I think carry on with that for some time.
Indeed. We will talk again soon. Martin, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Martin Beck, Chief Economist at WPI Strategy. Thank you to him. More comment coming in from you. Becky says, I've never been so embarrassed to be a female mathematician, accountant and an economist in my life. This woman, Rachel Reeves, has no ability to take responsibility for her own ineptitude. And she makes me feel ashamed to be a woman. Roll on in a couple of years when we have people who might actually be able to do something about this mess. She should be stood on a comedy club stage, not delivering our budget. Here's to another year of wreckage in our economy and our country, says. That's strong stuff as well. And thank you, Becky, for your comments. What's going to be interesting about this will be who the next government are, because many of the accusations against Rachel Reeves and the cohorts on the front bench are inexperience in business, or inexperience certainly as to whether people are financially literate enough to be a chancellor. I mean, it's a big old gig. You've got to have, you know, a few credentials and qualifications. One would hope to be anywhere near that job. I know government doesn't always work like that. What would happen if reform came in? Because it's often said, you know, there's a lot of support, a lot of love for Reform UK, bringing a new broom into the equation and perhaps even doing things in a way that they'd previously never considered. And that would be encouraged. But if there was a general election tomorrow, you'd be in a curious position, wouldn't you? Where you'd have, with 5 MPs there right now, and within about 3 months, if they called an election tomorrow, in 3 months, Reform would have to find hundreds of candidates. I know they've got some, and that's not a criticism, by the way, it's just a fact of the matter. The Tories would have to also do some hunting around. What would that look like in terms of somebody standing up giving a reform budget? Who would that person be? And would they be someone that you would trust more than Rachel Reeves? Well, I'd like to think the bar hasn't been set particularly high on that point. Steve's in Cambridge on this point of the budget. Steve, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
This lifting of the 2-child benefit cap won't benefit the children at all.
OK. Why not? I mean, it can give people more money to access if they're in that position, right?
No, because up until I retired last year, I was a gas engineer on social housing.
OK.
And you used to get to see how sort of people lived. I mean, I live in a council house myself.
Yep.
But you could smell the cannabis before you could smell the kids' breakfast. They'd have the biggest television and the latest games, but you'd go upstairs to work on the boiler and the kid would have a mattress on the floor.
Yeah. It sounds like a great place to live, frankly. When I was 18, I'd have killed for that. No, I hear your point. I mean, some might say, Steve, that's a stereotype. Not everybody lives like that.
No, I know they don't. Everybody don't live like that. But why give out money? Why not do it some other way? So that the children actually benefit.
Because this was all about protecting Keir Starmer's job more than it was about protecting child poverty. This was about him giving a nod to the left of his party. Don't worry, I've done that benefit thing you wanted, and hopefully it'll save him for another year or two from being spectacularly removed from office.
I very much doubt that.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting, like you keep saying today. I'm just waiting till tomorrow, till the money boys have had time, the financiers have had time to dig down into it.
Oh, tomorrow's going to be really interesting in that respect. Listen, Steve, thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. More comment, calls, messages on the way. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 4. Alex Phillips here at 4 o'clock, of course, with Drive. Before all of that, we're taking your calls and responses to the budget. We're also going to be talking about jury service and the abolition of juries in some cases as well, which has worried the life out of many people. Reaction to the budget. We've heard from Kemi Badenoch, pretty much on fire, did very well, social media loving the leader of the opposition on this. What about those other parties? Let's hear from the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage.
Basically, working people are going to be subsidising a welfare bill that shows no sign of going down whatsoever. Indeed, the Rachel Reeves version of abolishing the two-child cap will cost over £3 billion. I would very much sum up this budget as an assault on aspiration and an assault on saving.
Nigel Farage's response. Back to your calls. Paul in Newport. What are you doing, Paul? What have you got for us?
How you doing, my friend?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, fine. Fire away.
Every time I phone these days, I seem to be moaning.
It's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. There's very little else to do these days. We've got a lot of things to moan about, right?
We do like to. Anyway, listen to the people who phoned into you and just talking to my friends. If the boat issue was resolved today, I reckon the thing next on the agenda are benefit claimants who are taking the mickey, shall we say. I reckon if the boat system was resolved today, the working man would turn on anyone he knows is taking the mickey and sitting on his butt watching daytime telly while we all got that. There will be civil unrest. There will be people in the street saying, I ain't paying for you to do nothing while I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can feel, you can sense it. You listen to the people who are speaking to you. The working man is fed up to the back teeth with supporting people who will not support themselves. Sure. Because fundamentally, they don't have to. They just don't have to. You know it's like the thing where they say, okay, then if you make any AVCs to your pension, you're now going to have to pay an eye on it, right? You have to pay national insurance on your pension contribution. It's like, so let's say you put, if you're lucky enough, and you don't have to be earning a fortune to pay 40% tax, right? Over 50k. So if you say, okay, then mortgages come down a bit. I've got a few extra quid. I'm going to stick it in my pension because I won't be able to survive on the state pension. So you do that and you save 40%. But NI is currently at 13%, I think. So it's not now. So you've got to pay 13% as you put it in. When you take it back out, you've got to pay 20% at the current rate. So all of a sudden, so you'll save 7%. Well, is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you end up saying, well, don't. I mean, I thought we were supposed to be encouraging people to save for their old age. Well, this isn't doing that, is it?
No, it isn't. And I think that's rather the bit that's missed. And, people will call this a divide between left and right thinking, which is not a misplaced assessment. And that is this idea of personal responsibility. And, I think landlords are another good example of that, who are seen as these kind of horrendous pirates of bricks and mortar who wants everyone to live in a smelly, damp-ridden house with no roof. Well, of course, which is nonsense. It's a business. The average landlord runs a nice, plush place and has a great relationship with their tenant. It's a service and it's a business, etc. But there is that view. And, of course, landlords, mostly accidental landlords, Paul, someone who's inherited a house or whatever, think to themselves, well, this is a great way that I haven't got to use the state so much. I've got a bit of extra income. And then along comes a chancellor and taxes the pants off you.
But if you think about it, okay, most of us, I mean, I'm not a wealthy man. I'm the same as every other guy, okay? I've been working now for 46 years, And when you say, okay, we all know the state pension won't pay. We will not. You can't live on the state pension. So what happens is you get, all of a sudden you think, hey, the mortgage has gone down a bit. Yeah. So I've got a couple of £100 because the mortgage used to be like, 700. Now it's 500. Yep. Okay, I'm going to put a couple of £100, towards my pension. Just a little savings pension, probably with, some company who gets you 3% or something. And so you put away what you do. We're prudent. We think ahead, Yeah. Well, why bother? I actually think if someone said to me now that, what would be the ideal plan when you get to 67? When you get to 67, make sure you haven't got a penny to your name.
Yes, yeah. I know what you're saying. You'll be absolutely fine. You'll also get your care paid for you as well if you happen to require additional assistance. Listen, great call, Paul. Some real food for thought on that. That's Paul in Newport. Let's move then away from the budget to the David Lammy story. This broke while we were on air yesterday. The plans to scrap most jury trials and only keeping them for the most severe crimes, murder, rape, manslaughter, or offences that carry over 5 years. The idea here is to cut nearly 80,000 on the backlog. This is according to leaked papers, but the Ministry of Department of Justice are not running away from this. This appears to be something that is certainly being talked about, if not in the planning. Let's get a word on this from Jeremy Dean, KC, criminal defence barrister. Jeremy, always good to get your view on these kind of things. I mean, this is... I think you can go back to Norman times to trace the origins of a jury system. That gives you an idea of how long we've had that system. And it's always been remarkably wonderful that despite, all the... amazing people that make up a courtroom, people like yourself, very gifted barristers with, huge brains when it comes to the legal world. Ultimately, your fellow human's fate is decided by 12 men and women sitting, listening diligently, you hope, to the case. And that does certainly, on the face of it, sound, incredibly fair. What's not to like? But there's a backlog afoot, and someone's got to do something about it. David Lammy's idea, get rid of the juries. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Ian, I have to say that you've encapsulated the essence of the jury system extremely well in your introduction, because you've drawn the clear distinction between lawyers and judges like me, big brains, small brains, medium-sized brains, who are lawyers and steeped in legal principle, and on the other hand, members of the public, jurors, peers of the accused, and indeed complainants, who have an immense conglomeration of skills drawn from experience of life and common sense and so on. And that's, as I've said, the sort of, the power of the jury system. This proposal by David Lammy is a disgrace, and that is an understatement. It's clearly very badly thought through. It won't work. The backlog will increase. It's not fair. He has no mandate. This government have no mandate to abolish the jury. And if they do this, their legacy will be to destroy the very fabric of the criminal justice process, of which we are proud across the globe.
And I was about to say, on that point, I mean, quite aside from the fact that Mr. Lammy previously had gone around the place telling anyone who cared to listen that we must retain, is the word I was looking for, must retain the jury system. And he said that very loud and proud on many occasions. This one would assume perhaps goes deeper than the Secretary of State. Maybe there are other voices within that department are saying, look, there's 80,000 backlog here. I mean, that's unsustainable. It's only going to get worse. And here's, I guess, is the key, Jeremy. There is precedent for this because there are other countries around the world that function without a jury on some cases.
Well, Ian, if I could just say this, you can have a whole 3-hour programme on this topic. There are so many tentacles to this issue. Yep. But fundamentally, the proposition that judges should replace juries is completely unsustainable. I can tell you, Ian, I don't mean to sound pompous or arrogant, but I can tell you and all of your listeners, judges do not want this responsibility. They are not trained in this responsibility. Judges are lawyers, they are not fact finders, and they are steeped in the division of roles between judge and jury. For David Lammy, who 5 minutes ago was in the Foreign Office, to make this announcement and expect judges to switch their skill set on Monday the 5th of February, or whenever this proposal comes in, is ridiculous. And furthermore, this will only enhance the backlog because judges have a lot of other responsibilities, such as sentencing. They will need to write full detailed judgments if they are to be the fact finders. This will all take a huge amount of time. It won't save any time to do this, and it will only render the system more chaotic. This proposal is not just unsustainable and unfair. It's a recipe for further pandemonium within the process.
Some already do attack the jury system as being in some cases inadequate. In very complex financial cases is usually the go-to example of, where a case could rumble on for 18 months or something, quite aside from the difficulties of getting people to be off work for that length of time. Following a case, I've spoken to barristers who said, look, I was struggling to follow it. But so in cases such as that, some argue that the jury system perhaps isn't quite as, pure and authentic as we like to think.
Well, Ian, what I would say about that is this, that firstly, trials don't last that length of time because of juries. Juries are asked to come in and listen to the evidence. They've got nothing to do with the efficiency or logistics of the case. So in that respect, what's required is a filtering of the evidence and much more restrictive process. However, if there is an argument, which I don't support, but I can see two sides to this proposition, that in extremely complex fraud trials and trials which are characterised by expert evidence, if there is an argument that in that very, very limited quota of cases that there should be some amendment to the jury system, that's fine. But to rip the heart and soul out of our criminal justice process, to deprive men and women of good character who face 4 years imprisonment as opposed to 5 years imprisonment, or even 1 day's imprisonment of the jury system, whilst others who are charged with more serious offences have the benefit of the jury system. I mean, there's a further angle to this, which is that the proposal is fundamentally inconsistent and will give rise to inequality in the system.
And of course, it's fair to say as well, I've sat in from a press perspective on many trials, and I've seen if it's about naivety of the jury, you've got two barristers there who, usually beautifully explain elements, but you've also got a judge. Many a time I've sat there, you would have seen this far more than me, Jeremy, when, the old adage that judge is asleep. He's not asleep, he's just diligently listening, and then will explain brilliantly in very layman's terms to a jury, some finer detail or clarification of a case, because that's what his job is. He knows how to do that, and that's worked rather well over the years.
Well, I can promise you, Ian, that jurors are just as liable to fall asleep as judges. I mean, we're all human. I have huge respect for the judiciary. I'm a defence counsel. I've had 40 years of battles with judges on legal issues and so on, but fundamentally I have huge respect for the judiciary in this country. And my objection to this proposal has got nothing to do with the quality of our judges. It would be, if I may say so, it'd be rather like, you being asked to become a headmaster on Monday morning. They're being asked to do a different job altogether. That may be a slightly extreme.
No, but it's a good point, isn't it? That isn't the role of the judge. And just give us briefly, Jeremy, if you would, your thoughts on what is likely to happen here, because invariably these policies, they talk about being a leaked memo. Of course, it's not leaked at all. It's deliberately put out there so that people like us will debate it, and then almost a litmus test, perhaps. So often there's a watered-down version of what is originally suggested, or it doesn't ever see the light of day. What's your legal instinct on this tell you?
Well, it's more than legal instinct. I have been involved with the Criminal Bar Association on the inside with these proposals, not David Lammy's, but Brian Levison's. The answer to your question, Ian, is this: it will happen to a degree, but I think the opposition to David Lammy's proposal is such that it's much more likely to resort back to Lord Justice Levison's review, which is very different, although still objectionable, which is that for offences of up to 2 years, there will be no jury trial, and that trials will be with a judge and two magistrates as opposed to judge only. So it will be a watered-down version of David Lammy's. David Lammy's is way beyond Lord Justice Levison's and is very, very extreme. And sorry, and one last point. When you make through the analogy with other countries, we don't know how successful the system is in other countries, but as you said in your introduction, perhaps I can bring the discussion to an end by referring back to what you said. This goes back to Norman times. This is part of the heart and soul of Great Britain. You can't. This government cannot. They have no mandate to do this, and they should not be allowed to do it. Depriving citizens of trial by jury is ripping out the very, driving force of the criminal justice system. They weren't elected to do this, and they shouldn't be allowed to.
Powerful stuff to finish on, Jeremy. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Jeremy Dean, KC. He's a criminal defence barrister. He's been around the legal block for 40 years, involved in some of the most high-profile cases. That's an interesting view. I think his position is pretty much echoed by prosecutors and defenders in the legal world on this one. But how else do you... I mean, the idea that you're doing it to... not because you intellectually have thought, I've had a look at the system, it's not fair. So the fairest way to do it is to remove the jury from these kind of cases and have the jury on the... No, this is about, we've got a backlog, we've got to get rid of it. That's where I think the most questionable point is, that the reasoning is about time, not about efficiency and the purity of law. 0344 499 1000. More coming from you next on Talk. Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, if you've got the talkTV app, delete that beast because it's being replaced by the Talk app, OK? This time Monday. It's gone, kids. The talkTV app, gone. A distant memory. But the Talk app It's all new and everything there. If you're watching, listening, and all the other bits that come with that app, the Talk app, download it now. Bill's in Northumberland, says, afternoon, Ian, on the subject of absolute child poverty. Exactly what defines this? Does it actually exist in the UK? Go to parts of Africa and India, and child poverty is all around you. Great show and debate. It's a massive subject. Bill, thank you for that. And it depends on where you want to make the comparisons. Others would counter what Bill said and argue that actually that is obviously a comparison there. But in first world terms, you look to different measures to decide it. Is it poverty? Is it people who are just on hard times? Everyone's been there. Do people in poverty remain in poverty? And what is the line? Different organisations and different think tanks and economists will define poverty in different ways. Is it about solely... Somebody did define it for me. I can't remember what the line was. It isn't just about a single amount of money that tips you over the line. That is how politicians like to measure it. You know, it's that sort of one thing versus something else will tell you whether you are in poverty or not. Carl's in Liverpool on the two-child benefit cap issue. Carl, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. So I'm 4 months away from having my fourth child, and I'm working already 14 hours a day, plus at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And we've had to dip into savings. We've had to work out those extra hours, my wife included, all because we want to have another baby.
Mm-hmm.
But when you send a message like that today to say, don't worry about working, the rest of the mugs will pay your bills.
Yeah.
What's the point? I mean, and it really hit home today when she speak. I mean, they're all laughing and cheering, Ian.
Oh, I know. They thought they can't get their...
laugh and cheer about?
Because they can't get their head around the idea of anything you've just said, which is a completely logical and reasonable position. I know that's not everybody. Of course, the example that's always given is, you know, some people fall under hard times. That's true. I don't mind helping people who fall under hard times. I'm not sure that's the typical claimant of the additional benefit, though.
No, it's not, and people have been taken advantage of it. But the other day, it broke in that 500 illegal immigrants a day are claiming UC. The whole thing needs knocking down and rebuilding, and people need sacking.
You are spot on. Heads need to roll, people need sacking, and I keep saying this, we need to recalibrate the system and almost start again because something's gone horribly wrong. Carl, I've got to step in just because we're about to hit the clock and because Alex Phillips has pitched up. Thank you to Carl in Liverpool.
Hit that clock.
Hit that clock. What's going on, sister?
The budget. Have you been to, like, the sunbed or something? We have a glow.
I have a glow?
Yeah, you look like you've just been on an overnight holiday
I tell you what it is.
Yesterday.
I feel like I've got a glow. And
you got flu?
Well, there's two problems here. Either it's because we had the aircon up
Menopause.
and it was the menopause. It was very hot for a long time and we only just turned it down, so I'm cooling down.
Right.
Or I've got some man flu on the way, and that's worse than anything.
Yeah. It's very becoming. Or maybe you're just sort of boiling up with rage.
Oh, well, there's a little bit of that going on, isn't there?
Do you know what? It's not really. It's a rage-making budget, but it's also really black. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, the country's a barrel of water about to overflow, and what she's done is got a few little thimbles and gone, oh, let's wait till next time.
Yeah.
Except the only thing that, I think the thing that's going to sicken so many people, I think the top line, probably for our audience, is this sense that if you go to work, if you save money, if you've worked all your life and got a pension, we're coming back for a little bit more. If you happen to, you know, bobbed into the country about 5 years ago, never worked, enjoying the welfare state and popping out babies, then here's extra thousands of pounds. That sense of unfairness, I think, is the top line.
And it doesn't matter. It's not about not caring about anybody or not wanting to help people. I don't know any right-winger who wants to abolish the welfare system. No one is saying that.
But people have to help themselves. And, you know, she stood there in Parliament and she said, I am proud to be helping children brought up in poverty, you know, people who are working, people have separated, people whose partners have died. And I'm like, well, OK, but what percentage of, you know, all the multiple babies that I'm now paying for, and I ask nothing of the state.
What would that pie chart look like terms of...
What percentage of this are people
bereaved families?
Right, exactly. And how many are, you know, characters who frankly haven't contributed to the system. They may not have been born in this country, and actually their culture is to just have multiple babies and expect other people to pay for them. It's not okay.
Well, I went to school with a couple. There's always a couple of families down the road that you could point to and go, when